like to call to order the regular meeting of the Solvang City Council, August 26th, 6:30 p.m. Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Dearness,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Waite,
Here.
Mayor Toussaint.
Here. Robert, you mind leading us in the flag?
Yes. Please rise. Put your right hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, we'll start off with public communications. Lisa, could you please announce the criteria for public comment?
At this time, please direct comments to the City Council regarding consent calendar. Oops.
Typo?
Consent calendar items or matters not on the agenda. Sorry, I missed my place. But within the jurisdiction of the council, speakers are limited to 3 minutes.
Our first speaker is Ed Skitt.
Good evening, City Council. I'm going to make my usual comment about the having City Council comments and requests at the end of the meeting. I talked to the city manager earlier this morning and said I was be mentioning this, and I was asked him to come up and have somebody explain why the City Council comments and requests are at the end of the meeting. This council has displayed on numerous occasions that stated that we are open, clear, and transparent. If you're clear and transparent, the council comments and requests should be one of the first items that is discussed. That is the time when you have the most audience of the city of Solvang, and that's something that really should be out at the very first. We'll see what kind of answer I get, why we are having it at the end of the meeting. The second item I'm talking about was I did request from the city a copy of last year's billings by the firm of Hanley and Fleischman for the services rendered as city attorneys. Last year's billing to them was $82,401 for their contract and through their time they resigned. I also requested the billings for the current city interim attorney, and they only had the June billings, which was, on their contract was $6,600. The billings for the month of July have not been, were not available to the Lisa when I asked this morning. I understand there is an RFP going out for a permanent city attorney, and all I can hope is that one of the major criteria is that the firm have a great deal of experience in municipal law, not a general law firm, but somebody who specializes in municipal and special districts, who are familiar with the various codes and requirements put on the cities and communities by the state of California. Thank you very much.
Andres and Steve Renfro.
Hello, I'm Andres Nuno from Enfuego Events. This is Steve Renfro, owner of Solvang Brewing Company. Good evening, councilmen and councilwomen. We are here to propose a new event here in the city of Solvang called the Solvang Fall Festival that would focus on artisan food, craft beer, and wine here in the month of November. The target dates are Saturday, November 16th and 17th. And this festival will be a weekend-long event that aims to highlight the artisanal small batch high-end craft beer and wine, as well as focusing on fall-themed foods produced here in the city of Solvang. We would also create a family-friendly event where the secondary location would be at the Mission San Ynez, where we create kind of a carnival atmosphere with a stage there where we'd do a battle of the bands for teenagers or young adults, as well as have some food vendors, carnival games, things of that sort. The heart of it would be focused on Solvang Park. The goal would be basically to invite every local community-based restaurant, retail vendor, or brewery, winery to join us. There would be no fees for them to join us and have a 10 by 10 or 10 by 20 booth located on the street. We would like to shut down a portion of the street from basically from First, sorry about that, from First Street to Copenhagen, and then from Copenhagen over to Second Street. Kind of create this triangle between Solvang Park and the parking lot, I believe is parking lot number 2, just for Saturday. And what we do is put those retail vendors, local restaurant owners, wineries, let them allowed to put the 10 by 20 or 10 by 10 tents on the street there. And that would happen between 11 and 10 o'clock with possible shutdown for the street vendors at 9 o'clock. But the beer garden that we would do in the Solvang Park would be from 11 to 10, with the tasting from 11 to 3 p.m. On Sunday, which would be the second day of the event, we are not asking for a street closure, but it's a secondary day that basically we can do a lot of live music at Solvang Park, beer garden. We'd also have a second day over at the Mission as well, and basically just try to create an event that falls between Danish Days and the end of the year. Go ahead. Sorry, Sam's. Yeah, and that would fall between the, like I said, after Danish Days and through the end of the year to kind of create another signature event during off-peak time during the, basically people not coming into Solvang as often as they would, say, during summer months. All right, that's my time.
I'll give you, Steve, did you want to talk for a minute?
Yeah, basically, what we're trying to do is just create another community event that actually is bringing all the business owners together out onto the streets. So rather than another event, we're just bringing people in from out of town, possibly having vendors so that the businesses have an opportunity to put their booths up and speak to the tourists and patrons and locals that are out there already, businesses that they're already frequenting, and just try to get as many businesses as we can to participate in the slower months, on the off-peak months. You know, we have a lot of busy months in the year, but we also have a lot of downtime, January, February, March, the first 2 weeks of November, that kind of stuff, and just trying to promote more activities in the city.
Thank you. Kevin Murphy?
Good evening, City Council members. I've got some paperwork here that I'll leave behind. Chris, these are copies of some information. Given the time, I've got some notes that I'll read by. My name is Kevin Murphy. I am here representing the San Ynez Valley Western Heritage Foundation, and I'm also a rodeo fan. We are a nonprofit organization that is responsible for organizing and hosting our wine country rodeo. Our foundation members realize that our rodeo and any other event we may sponsor will bring tourists to our valley. Solvang has the hospitality, food, and beverage services to provide our patrons and guests. Besides the wine country rodeo, it is our goal to have other events throughout the year as well. On behalf of our foundation, I'm asking the City of Solvang to help sponsor this great event. Through a vision from one man has now become a reality with hard work and determination and the help of volunteers and sponsors. I would like to introduce to you the man responsible for bringing all of this to fruition. His name is Ralph Loston. Ralph's idea was to incorporate his passion and understanding of rodeo and then blend this with the traditions of the valley and its viticulture. Thus, the San Ynez Valley Wine Country Rodeo. A rodeo is a unique time in September where big-name contestants scramble for last-minute points needed to compete in the largest event of the year. And that event is the National Finals Rodeo, held in Las Vegas every year, annually, in December. With this rodeo event, we will attract people not only from the Valley, but from Southern California up to Paso Robles and out of state. These visitors will need places to eat, sleep, and all of the amenities Solvang has to offer. Thank you for giving us this time before you tonight, and we hope we can work together and make this a huge event for our valley for years to come. Last year, I don't know who was able to attend the rodeo, but it was a success, to say the least. Given the amount of time that we had to put it together, it was really quite something. We also had it at the same weekend as Danish Days, which worked out actually pretty well. We noticed there was a lot of Viking hats walking around the rodeo, and that was pretty cool to see. Also, just a side note, the PRCA gave us a very high rating for last year's rodeo, and I can tell you that was a success. Thanks very much
Thank you.
for listening to us.
Michael Baker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Michael Baker, CEO, United Boys and Girls Clubs. Just wanted to stop in to give you an update on the happenings with the newest location for our organization. As I've told you before, we have a club in Carpinteria, Goleta, the west side Santa Barbara, Lompoc, Buellton, and our newest location now here in Solvang. We've been open now for a little over a week, and our goal was to hopefully get about 20 kids enrolled in the first week. We're up to 25, so we're very excited about that. And if you know of children that need the Boys and Girls Club services, I empower each and every one of you to recommend them come to the Boys and Girls Club. We'll do whatever we can to make sure to get those kids enrolled as quickly as possible. That program, again, is on the lower campus of the elementary school, and we're very excited and looking forward to hopefully having a few council members and even the mayor, maybe even the city manager, stop in for a visit someday. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was our last public speaker. With that, we'll move on to the city manager report and advanced calendar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got three quick items to update here tonight. The first is we have a vacancy currently on our BAR, Board of Architectural Review. We advertised the vacancy in the newspaper and on our website. If any members of the public are interested, I would ask that they step forward, submit an application as soon as possible, or call Lisa Martin, our city clerk. We did also reach out to prior applicants to see if anybody else was interested. So we're searching for an applicant to fill that vacancy. The second item on my list here is community choice energy. So the cities of Santa Maria, Goleta, Guadalupe, Carpinteria, and the county of Santa Barbara are all currently or recently entered into a joint powers authority with the Monterey Bay Community Power, which is a community choice energy program that's seeking to consolidate community choice energy on the Central Coast. Community Choice Energy, or CCE, is a program that allows cities and counties to aggregate the electricity consumption within their jurisdiction and buy that electricity from renewable energy sources on the open market. What this does is allows them to serve their customers at a discounted rate. The program through Monterey Bay Community Power is seeking to get as many of the cities as possible so that they can improve their market buying power. And the way the program works is that they purchase the electricity on the open market. They pay the investor-owned utilities, in our area that would be PG&E, for the cost of power distribution through PG&E's grid, and then any savings left over are passed on to the customers. NBCP estimates cost savings for residents in Solvang, if we were to express interest, to be anywhere between 5% and 8% through 2025, with greater savings potentially after that. In order to enter into the JPA, state law requires the city, any city expressing interest, to adopt a resolution as well as a CCE ordinance. The deadline for notifying Monterey Bay Community Power of our participation, if interested, would be October 1st. Therefore, if we wanted to move forward with exploring the opportunity, we would have to move quick and bring this item forward at our 2 September meetings. Recognizing that this is a change in billing for residents, I do not want to bring it back without council at least providing me some sort of nod of interest here tonight. State law requires a 1-year waiting period, so if we were to enter in this year and be accepted by MBCP, then the on-bill credits would begin in 2021. If we entered into the program, residents are allowed then to opt out of the program and continue receiving electricity directly through PG&E. If we decide to move forward, then the MBCP, along with the cities of Goleta, Santa Barbara County, and Santa Maria, would be doing pretty extensive outreach in this next year through multiple mailers, events, workshops for the public, as well as staffing a local call center to answer any questions and assist customers. If this is something that the City Council believes we should look into, then I'm happy to add this to the advanced calendar for September 9th. I have confirmed with Monterey Bay Community Power they have a staff member available that could attend that meeting and provide a presentation and discuss further their program. So if there's any interest in moving forward, I would appreciate nods or no's. I see.
I had a few questions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Just clearly, what is the advantage of going into the program? And then you mentioned something about opt-in or opt-out by the residents. So are you telling me that if we did move into the CCE, residents would have the right to still opt out of it?
That is, so to your second question, yes, if we moved forward, residents individually would still have the right to opt out of the program.
But without us moving forward with it, they can't opt into it.
Correct.
Okay.
We would have to adopt an ordinance applying CCE within our jurisdiction. That's how we would get into the program and allow them to take advantage of the program. Clearly, what the advantage is the CCE has figured out that between the cost of purchasing power, PG&E or other investor-owned utilities, pass on some of the overhead to their customers. So through Community Choice Energy, in effect, they're buying the electricity in bulk, and then at the end of each month, they give a rebate back to each customer. In the first couple of years, it's for 5% of electricity consumption, and starting sometime around 2023, it would then increase to 8%. So in effect, each month, residents would save 5 to 8% on their electricity bill.
Got it. Okay. I'm open to it.
David, I don't know if you know all this, but how long has this program been around?
It's early 2000s at some point in time is when the legislature passed the law.
During deregulation?
Yeah, and in recent years, they've become increasingly popular throughout the state. I actually was involved in looking into them down in the Coachella Valley area when I was for Indian Wells. We determined that it was a pretty good program. The city of Rancho Mirage actually moved forward with it, and their residents were happy with it, and they were making money out of the program.
Okay. How many, roughly how many cities
Oh, in total?
that are doing it now?
In the state or with Monterey Bay?
In the state?
Oh, I couldn't
Okay.
tell you.
And it's only renewable energy resources?
It's not only, but Monterey Bay Community Power has made their target the purchase of 100% renewable energy.
Okay. And is there a chance that rates can go up if something goes amiss?
Yeah, I think rates are always going to go up. I don't think, the production of electricity is going to get any cheaper, but it's more the cost comparison is to the investor-owned utility. Instead of them purchasing power on your behalf, it's the aggregation of all of the cities and counties on the Central Coast that are purchasing that energy instead.
Okay. And then the last question is, during that 1 year, not probationary period, but that 1 year waiting period, can you opt out during that time if something comes to light, you're not happy with what you're hearing from other folks?
I believe so. I believe there is what they explained to me was an off ramp ahead of implementation, And there is a cost to the city of going into the program because there's marketing materials and brochures, and there's some cost for Monterey Bay Community Power in bringing on new members into the JPA. What those costs are, I don't know. That's
Okay.
where if we wanted to move forward, then they would come in September on the 9th and give us a full presentation. We would have all of the documents ready so that if the council wanted to move forward at that time after hearing from them, then at least it would be on the agenda for you to take action that night.
Okay, I'm done. That's my last question. Thank you.
All right.
So do I hear?
Do we have general support for that to go on the advanced calendar, or?
Yeah, I would listen to what they have to say.
Okay.
All right.
We will do that. And then lastly, I will draw attention to the advanced calendar as we did make a minor modification. As you can see, I've got a copy here, and where we have meeting date just to the right of that, we've added a section now, a column for council goals. So as we talk later tonight about the action plans to deliver on city council goals, this was our way of responding to prior requests from city council to clearly identify on the advanced calendar what items are council goals. And so we tried to identify them by the numerical ordering that we put into the action plan. And so that should help to identify future stuff that is council related. So for September 9th, for example, we've got coming up 3 items. The consideration of moving forward with a bicycle pump track at Hans Christian Andersen, an amendment to a janitorial service contract that we have right now in exchange for filling 1.5 FTEs between our maintenance and park maintenance services, meeting the goals of doing more with less, and then looking at our pavement management system, which is one of the capital needs assessments that's identified under Goal 2. We'll get into that a little bit later on, more in depth tonight. That concludes my report.
Thank you, David. Next on the agenda is the Special City Auditor's verbal report. Thomas Woodrow.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I was actually prepared to report on a different item first, so I'll get my... All right, council, members of council, I just wanted to report to you on a number of the items that I've been working on as Special City Auditor. The first one, and I will, well, I'd like to pat myself on the back, but I'd pat you on the back and the city manager as well for helping, was the hiring of Katie Fleckenstein as our, I guess it's interim public information officer, all-around communications professional. One of my tasks was to look at best practices for communications. Honestly, City of Solvang doesn't have best practices at this point, so our website needs updating. We don't really have social media of any particular, certainly not up to contemporary standards. We don't have an e-newsletter that goes out. There's one that goes out for the city of Santa Barbara that's pretty good. So I've been comparing what we don't have and what other cities do have, and there's a big gap. So I did sit down with the city manager and talk about putting plans together for us to achieve those goals. But according to the council, I think we needed ad hoc services. I went out and I interviewed a number of different firms, got their rates, found out their expertise, and was fortunate enough to find Katie, who is local, has her kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening here, has lived here some time in the valley. She also has good relationships with local media and hopefully even better ones. So as far as my charge, my purview, the number of items on my list, that's one we have managed to accomplish. She has a professional services agreement in place, and she's been performing her duties, I think, admirably. So I'm grateful to Katie for that. Moving along, I also, and we'll touch upon this perhaps in another agenda item, I've been really working on the audit for the Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau. And like I said, I think that can be part of an item that's coming up. You're going to be discussing that. So That's another item. Also, I've met with, by the way, I want to let you know, city staff has been very cooperative, very helpful in when I walk in the door to sit down and talk about performance metrics, operational excellence, areas which they might be frustrated that they think could be better about the city. It's really been a pleasure to sit down with our city staff, and they're forthcoming and they're brimming with ideas. One of those is the planning department. So there's a lot of, I found a lot of energy, a lot of ideas. And I've also reached out to other cities, other municipalities to find out how they handle their planning services. And I'll have a more detailed report. But a lot of cities our size do things, some do it the same way, and some do it very differently. They contract out for their services. Others have full-time employees with varying results. But I know that's a priority for the council. You've expressed that you want to have the best possible planning services that we can, and let the world know, at least the development community, that we are certainly open for business. Along those lines, I've had the opportunity also to meet with different members of the development community, different people who are interested or potentially bullish on Solvang, and I know that we've talked about really what can happen with the remaining infill for Solvang, and that by having confidence from the business community in our planning services and really in the city as a whole, that we could usher in some really exciting developments in the future that might provide additional transit and occupancy tax. It might pay for some of the things that are needed. These are, once again, all along the lines of what you've expressed are your priorities. So I found that, that they're still very excited, looking forward to a future, looking forward to whether it's a revamp or a new attitude, improved relations with the business community vis-a-vis a business liaison, whether it be you on the council, whether it be a staffer, it could be the city manager, or certainly while I'm on board, it could be someone like me, interacting with business and letting them know that we are open for business and that there are significant opportunities ahead. So that is another item on my list. I have other items on my list. I had a good chat with Matt Vanderlinden about really water in the valley, wastewater in the valley, and the idea that there might be a regional solution. I know you discussed some of this at the last meeting, and apparently there have been some previous councils have considered studies, but the bottom line is there may be opportunity for regional solution, but I would suggest to you, after talking to different members of the community and different political entities, jurisdictions, that this is really a political solution as much as it is an actual structural solution. I think Matt shared with me that he thought this would be a beautiful, that you could have a regional water/wastewater solution, and that's exciting. But in the end, all these fiefdoms, all these jurisdictions have their own ways of doing business, and I suggest that whatever solution is the right one, technically, really is predicated on the ability of the council and staff really to form those relationships, enhance them, develop them, and come together as a valley to develop a solution that will save time, save money, and do something good for the infrastructure of the valley. So those are just a handful of the items that I've been working on. One of the first items was an audit, at least hiring an auditor, but really Zena, who's our new Administrative Services Director, and the City Manager, David Gasaway, already were well along in that process, and they did hire an auditor with great experience. I think, David, you said it was one of the top 4 auditing firms. So they are here and they are doing their thing. That is no longer will be an item on my list. So that's my report for tonight. If you have any questions, feel free. Otherwise.
Thank you very much for just letting us know what you're working on. One of the things that you brought up was around social media. I believe I was talking with Katie Fleckenstein earlier about starting a city Facebook page, some of these things to get communication out there. And I'm not aware, do we have an actual policy around that, and how do we get that activated? Is that something we need to put on the advanced calendar? That might be.
Yeah, I don't believe we have a social media policy, but it's something that is of consideration that we were looking into.
Okay. So I'd like to put that on the advanced calendar to get something like that going.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, with regard to social media, I think there's really a couple things that I would note. Number one, it is good to have a plan rather than just to have it. At the same time, it doesn't cost a lot of money. It's something that can be implemented fairly soon. It's something that the vast majority of people in the valley really have access to, and they may get their news that way a lot more often than they do from one of our other venerable publications. So I noticed that Facebook is pretty broadly used here in the valley. So I think it's one of those items that can be addressed sooner than later.
That's depressing.
People, there's all kinds of pages on Facebook, all kinds of news, Sunny Valley Emergency, for sale. That's where people go all the time. So I would recommend it. I also have recommended, Katie looked in the notion of a Twitter account if council members want to tweet out about what's going on, or even if the city manager, if there's an emergency, or the city attorney has it. Any one of us, any person associated with the operation, day-to-day affairs of Solvang, really owes it to the community to be able to communicate. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and I think some of that's well within our grasp, although, like I said, I think David suggested as part of a larger plan, but some of it you can address pretty quickly.
All right,
So
thank
David,
you.
I got a quick question. David, did we budget funds for this very purpose?
We budgeted 15,000 in order to bring in a consultant to put together the overall strategic communications plan that would include looking at social media, looking at our website, identifying areas of gaps such as newsletter, e-blasts, and building a comprehensive program so that once we had an understanding of all of the things that we were missing from a communications best practice perspective, we could then go about implementing that plan so that we were better communicating with the public.
So then you'll come back to us with a request for funds to do that, to implement that?
Yeah, I believe Katie, at last indication, was utilizing a little bit more on the ad hoc service side of things from the contract that was in the agenda 2 weeks ago. So I suspect we will need to come back with a supplemental appropriation and a contract amendment in order to up that cost.
Perfect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tom.
With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Lisa, can I get a title readout?
The consent agenda is designed for routine administrative city matters and is approved by roll call vote with one motion. These items are discussed only on request of council members. Members of the public are afforded an opportunity to speak on consent agenda items during the public communications portion of the agenda.
Okay. Does anyone have any items from the consent agenda they'd like to pull?
I'd like to pull H and I.
H and I, okay. And I'd like to pull A.
I'd like to pull C.
C, okay. Could I get a motion approving the other items?
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items A, C, H, and I.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
So moved and seconded.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Dearness,
Yes.
Wade,
Yes.
Mayor Toussaint.
Yes. We'll start with item A, approval of agenda as presented. It's my understanding that for items 7 and 8, the appeals that were requested by both entities to table them.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that's correct. Both of the appellants have written and asked those items be continued. They suggested a potential date in October the 14th, if your council wanted to look at putting that on the advance calendar.
Okay. So I'll move that we accept tabling of 7 and 8 until future notice.
I'll second that.
It's been seconded.
Mayor Toussaint,
Yes.
Councilmember Wade,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Dearness,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Passes 5-0. Item C.
Okay, I had a question on that. Adopt on second reading by title ordinance updating Section 111.1 of the Solvang Municipal Code to include the special city auditor as a position required to disclose all investments, income, and interest in real property pursuant to California Government Code Section 87-200. So my question is, why wouldn't this be something that our finance department would do? Why do we need an additional person to disclose this?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Waite, this is actually a requirement that officers of the city fill out conflict of interest filings, and oddly, your municipal code does not have any provision at all related to the special city auditor. As far as I can tell, your municipal code was never updated after the city charter was adopted. Clearly, the activities that Mr. Widrow as special city auditor is performing mean that he ought to be filling out the conflict of interest disclosure forms. And so this is not actually having the city do anything additional. This is requiring that the special city auditor fill out those disclosure forms.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Can we get a motion approving item C?
I'll make a motion to approve item C.
I'll second the motion.
Been moved and seconded?
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Dearness?
Yes.
Wade?
Yes.
Mayor Toussaint?
Yes. Item H.
So I just had a question on this. There was a flyer attached to the consent agenda showing all the events and whatnot. My question is there any sort of metrics, or are we keeping track, and do we have some sort of report on all of these events and how much they're being attended, how much these services are being used? Basically, are we checking up on any of these things that just to make sure they're worth providing or doing? That's my question, and I don't know if we do or not.
Yes, that we've added these as items that we're reviewing in order to create those metrics moving forward. In years past, I know depending on the programming that Parks and Rec staff did track and monitor different programs. They do so in coordination with the City of Buellton in order to come up with the recreation programming, so that between the two cities, we're not offering too many overlapping services, and so that they're complementary in nature.
And then the other issue, or not issue, but with the Boys and Girls Club opening a place here in Solvang, has anyone spoken with the Parks and Rec in Buellton, and are they coordinating on events or coordinating on activities, especially after school and whatnot, to so that we don't have, again, over administrative, payments and whatnot?
Off the top of my head, I don't know if anybody's spoken with Boys and Girls Club. I would imagine they have, but I can get you that answer later.
Do we have a motion to approve item H?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve item H.
I'll second.
It's been seconded?
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
Dearness?
Yes.
Wade?
Yes.
Mayor Toussaint?
Yes. Passes 5-0. Item I.
So this question might be for Matt. Have we, I know that we're looking to purchase this piece of land. Has there been I guess the question is, do we actually have to purchase it? Have we done a schematic where it shows us doing the plant improvement where we don't purchase the land and we can work it out so it still works? That's my question.
Well, good evening, Mayor Toussaint and council members, and Councilman Johnson. So the alternative analysis study, for all of the alternatives, it was recommended to acquire additional land. So the amount of land varies slightly from alternative, but one of the things that's extremely difficult to do is to maintain the operation of an existing wastewater treatment plant and do any kind of major upgrades to your electrical equipment, to the lab, and to the control system for the plant. The existing building is pretty old. The equipment inside it is really basically reaching the very end of its useful life. And so, and the location of the building is not a good location. We don't have good radio communications from that facility. And there's, it's basically down at the bottom of the plant, so the recommendation is to put that, the new office and lab and control center at the top of the plant. So that'll be better for emergency response. The operators, right as they get to the plant, the first thing they get to is the office and the control system.
So part of the reason for purchasing up at the top is because it's narrow up at the top, so you're widening it so you can have the building up there?
Correct, that's correct. Yeah, the district room. And then the circulation, as you probably can remember, when we drove past some of the areas, we had to sort of back up and kind of maneuver. And so we were just in a small vehicle, but the big semi-trucks that come and drop off the bins for the biosolids removal, they have difficulty and they have to maneuver quite a bit. So one of the other recommendations was to basically improve the access on the east side of the plant.
Right.
And so that's where we'd be expanding. And the other thing is that's the area where the recycled facilities would go, some of them anyway. And so at this point, the exact extent of those facilities hasn't been like detailed out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really are recommending proceeding with the purchase so that we have the extra area for the new office and lab and control center to improve access, and then have a little extra room for whatever future recycled water facilities the city may implement in the future. So rather than do it in 2 steps, we recommend just getting the full amount that we might need for the next, several years.
And there's probably a cost to the 2-step process versus, so all these things kind of.
Correct. Mayor Stomp, that's a very good point. Right now, the Alisal Ranch is a willing seller, and as you can imagine, we went through a process on Alisal Road for the sidewalk, and we had some particular property owners that were not very cooperative and willing, and we're trying to gouge the city, but the Alisal Ranch is agreeing to the appraised value, which is a very fair price for the amount of land we're requesting. And so they've basically done everything they can to cooperate with us and help us. So we do thank them for all that. So the staff would recommend that we proceed because,
I got a
down the
quick
road,
question.
we don't know.
What happens to the existing physical structures and things like that? Do we have to demolish them, or do they just stay in place?
Most of the structures at the plant now will remain in place, but the existing office, lab, control center, that could either be demolished or it could be repurposed for storage or as a shop or something like that. If you recall, at the existing plant, we've got the sequencing batch reactors kind of up the hill about midway in the site, but down at the bottom in front of the office are the old basins from the prior old plant. And so one of those basins, it's proposed to be reused for the sludge and biosolids processing, but there's 2 of them. There's actually 2 big basins next to each other. But the one that's to the east is proposed to be removed and demolished.
Is that part of our estimates for cost?
Yes, that's all been included in there, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And just real quick, with that additional land acquisition, do you see any future opportunity for any solar production or anything to help offset some of the energy?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So proposed with the cost estimates and with the project right now is implementing solar panels on top of the new office building. And there's also a garage that we use for the VACCON truck and some of the other equipment. And that structure was designed to allow for the additional loading of solar panels on the roof of that. So basically, we would utilize the new structure plus the existing structure for all solar panels. So that is proposed with the project right now.
Thank you. Can I get a motion approving item I?
I'll make a motion to approve item I on our consent agenda.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded.
Councilmember Waite,
Yes.
Dearness.
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor Toussaint.
Yes, passes 5-0. With that, we'll move on to the regular agenda. We have item number 5. I will be recusing myself, so Robert Clark will take over for that item.
Item 5, agreement with Visit SYV for Solvang Stomp services.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, as you may recall, at our last meeting, we had some discussion about this item. Solvang Stomp is an event that is coming up on October the 19th. It's actually being marketed and included in a series of events that are taking place as what's called Taste of the Valley, which is essentially taking the place of a wine harvest festival that used to take place years ago. Because the item is coming up so quickly, there was a need for someone to make sure that it actually happens. We've had some discussions with Visit San Ynez Valley. They're willing to take on making sure that it actually happens. We had some, I call them very pleasant contract negotiations with Visit SYV, came up with a draft contract. I met with Shelby Sim last Friday. He had it reviewed by his attorney. The essential elements of the contract is that the city will provide what I'm going to call seed money of $50,000 to Visit SYV, and Visit SYV is going to make sure that the event gets put on. And then if there are any funds that are raised by the event, those funds would be returned to the city. So potentially the city could actually get all of its seed money investment back. Potentially it could actually get more than its seed money back. One of the issues, because of the, I'll call it lateness and some questions about the budget that was a concern to Visit SYV, is that it may end up costing more than $50,000. Councilmember Johnson wanted to make sure that the city's exposure was not more than $50,000, and so what we've now provided in the contract is that if Visit SYV believes that it is going to go over $50,000, then they will let us know, and if we believe that's reasonable, then they can use actually monies that have been raised at that point from ticket sales or other things, so they could, in fact, then cover additional costs over $50,000, but the city's exposure would be limited to the $50,000. I've provided you with a revised version of the contract with some minor changes, again, that I negotiated with Mr. Sim, and with that, we would recommend your approval.
Okay.
I'm sorry, may I say one other thing? I attended attended the SCVB meeting this morning, and the SCVB voted to release any of their interest, at least for this year, in Stomp. And so I think this should be I think this should be a completely kind of clean transition.
Okay. And any property or props that went towards the event?
I think they released any of their interest in it.
Okay.
I don't know whether there are. I actually don't know that much about it. I think I went to it last year, if I remember, but I don't remember that much about any props or anything.
Okay. Does staff have any questions for the?
Do I have a question for staff? Yes.
Yes. Just
You mentioned that the SCVB had released any interest. Help me understand that concept, because my understanding is that we didn't license that to anybody, and I want to make it clear that the city essentially owns the opportunity, right? Or am I mistaken in understanding that?
I can tell you that I've spent an unusually large amount of time on these various contract issues. I have not extensively researched all of the things that are not apparently in conflict, and at least right now, this seems to be one that is not apparently in conflict, so I have not spent your legal time looking into that. It is an event that, as I understand, takes place basically in the streets of Solvang. It requires permits from the city to use the streets of Solvang, and it has always been, it only happened once before, but last year it was funded entirely by the city of Solvang.
So it's an organic event. They came, they petitioned for the opportunity to do it, they got the permits, and they did it, right? But nobody actually owns the rights to this event, at least not in our city.
I'm not aware of any ownership. Again, I've spent ridiculous amounts of time on this, and I think Councilmember Johnson would agree that he didn't ask me to.
That's okay.
Spend more time
I'm
on
asking
this.
this for a reason, which we'll discuss later. But I wanted to, could you go ahead and put together some short brief that explains to the council this particular issue? Does the city own all the rights to these events inherently? And then we essentially license it to people or give them the opportunity to do this? How does this work?
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, if you all direct me to spend more time on doing that, I'm of course happy to spend more time doing that. I don't want to keep shocking the system on the costs of this negotiation process.
I would actually like to wait and discuss more. There's another agenda item that we can go over and discuss, and if it comes back up and we still want to talk about it, I would recommend that we wait to direct you to do that.
I think we'd have to wait anyway. These are just questions.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so we are going to wait on whether or not we want to accept this agreement?
No, we're just talking about what Chris was asking the attorney to do. That's what I'd rather wait
Oh,
on.
okay.
I don't wanna
just
That
go-
feel-
wasn't specifically Stomp.
Correct, it wasn't.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we don't even need to discuss it right now.
Okay, well, I just want to point out to the public that we have already said that we are going to have a grape stomp.
Correct.
So it's already an announced event, and we have an organization that's willing to put this on for us right now.
Right.
And is willing to give us any profits from this. And it's good PR. It's an event that we've said we're going to have, and I would like to see us go through with this.
That's our recommendation, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Waite, was that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, why don't you
Yes.
make the motion?
No, we can't make a motion yet.
Why can't we make the motion?
opened it up to public comment.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
I apologize.
I'll be making the motion after that.
Yes. Now, I don't, so is that the end of the council
No more
comments?
questions, right?
Okay.
These are questions, yeah.
I don't have any speaker slips for this item on the agenda, but if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this agenda, feel free to. Come on up.
Let's get City of Solvang. The one question I have is, if the city wants to support this and give them $50,000, and if there is any profit, the city wants the profits back, the city itself should run Stomp. They should not be putting it out to somebody else. You just said that we're going to take the money, give them the money. If there's any profit that is generated by Shelby, we want the profit. If you want the profit, the city of Solvang should take the responsibility of running the operation. If Mr. Sims is going out and taking the effort to put this together, he should be entitled to at least a portion of the funds that is generated for this event to use for seed money for other events that are coming along in the valley that support both the city of Solvang and the rest of the valley. But if the city wants all the profits of the Stomp, the city of Solvang itself should put on the Stomp. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a quick question?
One-
Can we bring up Shelby,
He was like going,
since he happens to be in the
no,
audience?
please.
Well, I
Shelby,
mean,
do you want to come up and talk for a moment?
after all, he is putting on the event, right? And I'd like him to explain how that ties into the rest of the valley.
Thanks, Chris.
Mayor Pro Tem
Thank
Clark
you.
and City Council. The reason why Visit SYV has a vested interest in Stomp, it is part of a 4-day, 6-town food, wine, and experiential event. And this is the premier event at Solvang. Visit the Santinas Valley is a nonprofit, and so we are not looking for profit at this event. We're looking to bring heads and beds. We're looking to bring people to the Santinas Valley. So it is not our goal to make money on this event. It's our goal to bring people to this event. So that is why we would have no problem if the CVB was still running this event and the CVB got the funds for this. So because the city is providing the seed money, of course, we want to make our money back, and any money left over is of no interest to us. It would be for the city to have. I would like to make one other point. The CVB does have props. They do have physical items that relate to Stomp. And besides releasing the intellectual property or whatever for Stomp, the budget of $50,000 is dependent upon us being able to use those properties of the CVBs, the props, as you call them, Mr. Council Member DeGiernis. that we would have use of those. Otherwise, we would need it would be around approximately $65,000 to do the event, and we would come back and, of course, negotiate that. But there is a lot of work that's been done. The CVB did an amazing job in the last year. Of course, again, just want to stress that it would be awesome if the CVB was still doing this event this year. We do have a vested interest, and the budget would stay down to $50,000. We hope, if we were able to utilize the CVB's existing properties that they used last year.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, at this point, I'll close the public comment and back to council comments. Oh, Karen?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion to proceed with this agreement for contract of services for Solvang Stomp.
I'll second the motion.
Wait, I want to comment.
Yes, you want to comment? Go ahead.
You guys are in a hurry. First of all, I want to thank Shelby for stepping up and taking over the event on such short notice. Visit the St. Ines Valley for doing that. I appreciate the quick thinking and efforts both by our attorney and the mayor, Daniel, for helping to negotiate all this and then bringing this to fruition in such a short time. I think that proves that this council can get things done and wants to get things done, and we have the people in the community that will help us to do that. Thanks again. And I would second that motion, unless you want to take the second credit. Well, it's your deal. You negotiated it. You get the second.
I will second the motion.
All right. Lisa, take a roll call, please.
Councilmember Waite,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Dearness,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Clark.
Yes. Okay, on to the next agenda. We want to bring the mayor back in. I think he's a Checo. Thank you.
Where you been?
Item 6, Speaker.
Okay, on to item 6.
Item 6, direction on Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau negotiations and potential contract.
We get a staff report?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I have to admit this is one that I wish I could turn it over to Councilmember Johnson to give the report, but I will do it. It's not as happy a story as the last one we just had. As you again may recall, at your last council meeting on August the 12th, Councilmember Johnson and I were directed to try and negotiate a new contract with the SCVB for the remainder of calendar year 2019. We, I think, started with great hope. I actually stayed here rather than leaving at the time I was expecting for a trip. We went to the SCVB board meeting. They authorized their board president to meet with us for those negotiations. We had those negotiations. I thought that we had arrived at an agreement. I left then for my trip. Councilmember Johnson had some additional discussions. We put together a draft agreement, which we sent to the SCVB early last week. And I then actually came home early because I was expecting that we might have discussions to iron out any additional or issues that we had not caught correctly in a draft contract on Friday. However, I was notified by email by the attorney representing the SCVB that the draft contract we had provided was wholly unacceptable. And so we do not have something to recommend to you this evening. I do believe that we need to have your direction on a couple of actions. Again, as we were at the end of the month of July, the SCVB has said, and I believe that this is their direct term, they're going to go dark on August the 31st going dark would, as I understand it at least, mean that the Visitor Information Center would be closing. I think that that's not something that any of us want to have happen. So we have a need for alternative direction on that item. I'm going to ask the Special City Auditor and Zena to also kind of jump in on a couple of things, including on audit activities, but on the need for the Visitor Information Center to remain open. Mr. Widrow has discussed with a couple of staffing agencies that they would be able to keep the Visitor Information Center open for whatever particular time we need, and hopefully would be able to keep the wonderful people who work there, continuing to work there. As I understand, the cost for doing that would be in the 30 to 40% of salary range. That's actually less than what the interim contract with the SCVB had provided for the month of August. We also would need to somehow provide for Yule Fest, and I think our recommendation is that you authorize us to go and seek alternative providers for Yule Fest services. That could be through the ad hoc committee that you've already formed to look at promotional activities, or it could be Councilmember Johnson and myself. Again, a big part of this item, though, the council at your meeting of July the 24th had essentially pulled further negotiations for the city to begin performing an audit about some financial concerns with the previous contract with the SCVB. And so I think Xenia and Tom may have some findings from that, if you would like.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Mr. Wilbrand, what would you like me to comment on first?
I guess I would like you to comment on whatever you've done on attempts for audit and anything that you may have found out about prior year funding, current year funding, any other particular things. Again, I'm not the auditor. I'm turning this over to you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to hand you a few documents here. This is just the email that I sent out to the SCVB. Really encompasses the request for information, which is really what Special City Auditor does. My prime directive is to seek out information and get answers. So I'm going to hand this to you. Yes, David, you want.
Yeah, pass those down.
So it's really not for me to get indignant, but I do feel a sense of frustration. And I don't want to direct it towards some of the good people that we've worked with recently representing the SCVB, but I am frustrated with the organization because the very reasonable request that you have in front of you, the audit that I am responsible to perform, I've not received the answers that I need in order to complete the audit. And I'll give you an example of some of those questions. The SCVB provided me with a vendor list that by expense for the last 5 years. And if you recall at the last meeting, I had a question, and I think I ran it by others, and I did express it here publicly, that I was concerned that the second largest item on this vendor expense list totaled some $830,000. That's the second largest expense that they have, and I just, as a special city auditor, would like to know where that money went. That's all. It's a fairly large number. It's the second biggest one. It's $830,000. And I think Councilmember Johnson said something at the last meeting that doesn't mean that someone has absconded with those funds at all. It could be a QuickBooks mistake, but it's a fairly large one. And I've had to go out to other financial professionals and other institutions and other organizations and ask, what is a percentage of your expenditure that's reasonable to be listed at $830,000, approximately 30% of your vendor expense over the last 5 years? And the response I've gotten is that 2% is about the right number, but it could, in certain circumstances, elevate itself to 5%. So I also wanted a digital copy so I could share it with you. And once again, I'm not casting aspersions on the folks that are working so hard as volunteers right now in the SEVB. It is frustrating, though, that the history of the organization didn't think enough to specify that large expenditure. So that's a concern. There are other items that I would like to know more about. And I requested, for instance, an IRS account transcript for the past 10 years. Now, some of you might think that's onerous for a special city auditor to ask, but it's not in light of the fact that taxes were filed late for a number of years. And I don't know this for sure, but my preliminary understanding is that there may be penalties as much as $150 per day for being late for filing your taxes. And I would think that if you're doing business with the city, that would be a pretty important item. And I've gotten no answer. I've gotten no transcript. And yes, I feel a bit of frustration. Next, since July, it's my understanding that the SEVB had $102,000 in their account, and that they received an additional $26,000 from the city, and that according to a P&L today, they may have spent $15,000 of that money. I guess my question, as a responsible auditor, I would just like to know how that money was spent. Because in order for you to re-engage this organization in any kind of a contract, I would assume you'd want to know where their taxes, what the relationship is with the IRS, what they've spent when it comes to their vendor list, and very recently, how are they spending that money? So I did talk to Zena, our administrative services director, and she came up. I wanted to validate some of my questions and make sure I'm asking things that are entirely reasonable, and I'm not asking something that's unreasonable. And she was gracious enough to put together a summary, and I'd like to ask Zena to come up and tell us a little bit more about what you put together.
Good evening, Council. So I've been asked by Mr. Widgerow to provide some factual information about information that we have or have not received from SCVB to date per the contract. So in regards to spending as of this current fiscal year, city staff has not received any reporting for expenditures for July or August, although August is not yet closed. As far as our efforts on audit for the previous fiscal year, as you're all aware, per council approval, we have obtained Badavi and Associates to begin the audit process. They were here at the city last week, basically starting the audit process with city staff of the city itself, and they're looking at the relationship of SCVB and the city, and it is my expectation that they will be going forward, reaching out to the accounting firm that did the accounting for SCVB for last year to make sure that we have all the financials that we have. In my review of just what has been submitted to date from SCVB throughout the last year. There is records that, would be normal for an audit process. The only thing that we are missing currently, and I haven't specifically reached out to them and asked for this information, but I don't have any information on the money market account, which is where my understanding is that SCVB was setting money for the reserve requirement per the city contract. So those are the findings that I have.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to close by saying I do appreciate, I did meet with Kim Jensen, and I do appreciate they're all volunteers now, and they've had a lot of turnover. So there's been significant turnover. Their executive director departed. Their financial officer resigned. So they've had some turnover. So once again, while I might have sounded frustrated up here trying to do my job, it's not toward the individuals. It's just a little bit towards the organization and its history, and perhaps the lack of oversight that's taken place over a number of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Are there any questions of the staff report?
Yes, I've got.
Okay.
Thomas? Can you provide a quick list of where the SCVB is out of compliance? For example, maybe it's tax returns, federal and or state or something else, and any other areas where they may not be in compliance?
Well, I could go into more detail, Councilmember Giornes, but I think I highlighted the major ones that are most important. I've had some people approach me about other concerns that maybe are peripheral to at least this financial data, but some have commented that members of their board in the past may or may not have leased property to the organization. That could present a conflict of interest when you sit on a board, and that you derive some financial recompense and you're a voting member and you might participate in those votes. I don't even know if you can recuse yourself and sit on a board, but I'm not an attorney. I've just had people approach me and say there may have been inappropriate, or at least what perceived to be inappropriate relationships. I don't have, evidence
So
of.
those are different than compliance issues, right? Those
Correct.
are conflicts of interest.
Those are conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest. So
Any self-dealing?
yeah, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth.
Can
All
you,
I'm saying to you,
if you found it, would you put it in writing for
if I
us?
found that to be true, of course. But once again, that someone was concerned and frustrated and said,
Oh,
"Hey,
I'm
that's
concerned.
not
I think
what they should
I think
do."
the community is concerned. That's why I'm asking about this. If you find this, please put it in writing. I think the CVB owes it. If they're fine and clean, that's great. If not, then I think the community needs to know.
Yeah, fair enough.
Are there any other questions of the staff report?
Yes.
Karen?
I'm looking, at the not specified 822,000, which you're talking about, which is close to 830,000. And then I'm also looking at the DVA advertising and publishing, which is 868. Do you believe that those two are related items?
Councilmember Waite, that's a good question. I don't believe they're related. It's simply a question I need to ask of those who are on the SVB. I think they're different because when you look at the total amount of money spent, the ad agency is number one and the unspecified is number two. So I think they're aggregate. I think they're different.
And the ad agency DVA, who's the owner of that? Do we know?
That's an excellent question. I don't have that answer.
It's called DVA advertising.
Up in
Right.
Oregon?
In Oregon, correct.
Up in Oregon,
Right.
up in the state of Oregon.
They're also used by Visit SYV. So Shelby can answer all those wonderful questions.
I was just wondering if perhaps maybe those were line items from different years, and it actually is a DVA advertising, and they just didn't specify that, so.
I've actually asked members of the SCVB about that. I haven't gotten a response that that's the case. I suppose it could be, but all I have is a hard copy, and it lists down to the tiniest expense what they spent their money on. It would be surprising to me, but I certainly would love to to know the answer.
I mean, because that's pretty much the entire amount of money that we have given them over the last couple years. And then on the first bank card, $136,000. So you're trying to.
I also don't have itemized, so I have charges.
I think technically the way I look at first bank card would be, again, not specified because you have, so it's really about 959,000 that we don't have specified in that
I don't
report.
know if the city has received itemized, and I still have to find that. I could work with Xenia. I don't know if they have itemized credit card statements that were part of their original audit. I don't know.
Is it worth doing an in-depth audit in a company that basically has no money?
I don't know. I just have one final question before we.
Please do, Karen.
I suppose that would be a good question. I'll reserve for later.
So Xenia, you were saying that you did not have any record of the money market account that they were required to have where they would hold reserves. Do you have any record of that?
So, to my understanding, STVB has been using 3 accounts. They had one that was major general account for operations. There was another one to keep track of debit card expenditures, and this money market was really just an account to set aside money for the reserve. So as part of the audit normally, yes, we would need to obtain that information. And in the records that I have to date from 18-19, that is the one bank account that is not present in those files. Those statements were not submitted to city staff.
Okay, I'm just trying to process all this.
So we're lacking transparency, maybe some accountability here? I'm sure we can remedy this quickly, but it hasn't been done, correct?
Correct. We would need to request that as part of the audit, yes.
Okay.
Xenia, while you're here, I believe I got an email earlier today stating that the prior city auditor retracted some kind of statement of an allocation of funds.
So as part of preparing for the 18-19 audit, I reached out to the previous auditor, Terry Craig, to obtain information on 17-18 audit, and he sent me a binder with basically all of his audit information as far as I understand, stating what's included in that, what type of statements, what he has actually audited. And one of those items was $19,000 that he had previously in the financial statements recorded as a transfer from the general banking account he had recorded as expenditures, which was actually cash that would go from the main checking account to the money market account. So he has issued a restatement or proposed restatement, kind of reached out and said that I am making this correction here. We could make a restatement if that's what the city desires to do. And he's basically listing the fact that he had understated the cash via this mistake by $19,000. And that has to do with the money market account.
So he booked an expense that should have been a transfer?
Yes.
Okay.
I was looking through some of the audit stuff that you sent me, Xenia, and I guess it was from the prior city auditor, I'm assuming. It said in there a few times about some $2,000 cash ATM withdrawals, but then no answer for what they are. And then it repeatedly talked about old receipts where the dates are crossed out and then re-entered back in. Do you know anything about that, or were those ever resolved?
I am not sure if I'm really following what you're looking at there.
So there's, I'll have to find it, but I'll come back to that one.
Yeah, I can definitely get back to the council with details.
Oh, yeah, just like on the money market account, I would assume the new auditors are going to request those statements as they do their audit to verify those counts.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In past city councils, whose job was it to audit the CVB, or the SCVB? Was it the city's financial director, or was it Terry Krieg's?
Well, the Terry Kirk is independent auditor, so technically the independent auditor works for the city. They have certain, ethics, certain requirements to be an auditor that they have to comply with.
Was it one or both?
Well, I think it's both. It's a combination.
So in other words, the finance director, the previous finance director, simply didn't think this was important? Is that what I'm getting? Didn't follow through on this?
Well, I would have to, I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
I mean, how did this slip by? Year after year after year?
Right, so I don't know anything about year after year. I mean, the only
It's not
factual
your- no,
information.
I'm not holding you accountable. I'm holding the previous council,
Right.
I'm sorry, the
I mean-
previous city council and city staff accountable. They had a duty, and they failed in that supervision.
So, I mean, my general recommendations would be that, going forward in contexts like this, it's easier to use fund accounting and project accounting to be very clear about how money is being spent. So going forward, that would be my recommendation.
So you're not going to let this happen?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question. I'm sorry. This is for Tom.
Sorry.
This has to do with the digital assets of the company. I had sent you a letter asking to document the digital assets of the CVB, and do they belong to the city? And if so, how do we get them back?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Dearness, it's a good question about digital assets. Mainly, I have not put together a complete inventory of what defines those digital assets. However, I can say they would include, the website, solvangusa.com. It would include, any email list of people that had been aggregated over the years who had responded to that website. So those are valuable digital items. But as far as who owns those, I will leave that to Mr. Woolbrand. I would think, we did have some negotiation that I participated in where we had requested that those assets, like any other assets, be turned over should that relationship be severed. And that was initially, that ended up being okay, and then it became not okay, at least with the SCVB. So I believe there is some...
Not okay?
Well, I believe, and I'll leave it to the city attorney to comment since he has greater knowledge of that point of the debate or the discussion, but I believe there is currently, that is not yet resolved as to whether the city would take possession of those digital assets or not. But that's an important point of contention.
I sent a letter to you earlier on this issue. Can you go ahead and respond to that letter in your term? In other words, I think I'd listed all the different types of digital assets that I
will
assumed
respond
they
to
have.
that.
Thank you. And then
Absolutely.
provide that to the council, because I think that would be useful in helping us make a decision here, especially in negotiations with them going forward.
As of right now, like I said, I don't think that's been resolved.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Are there any other questions of the staff report?
No.
Nope.
I just have two other questions. Does anyone know who the owner of Windmill Properties is?
Are you asking the audience or just us?
I'm asking David or
Oh.
Thomas, Chip.
I don't know who owns Windmill Properties. Is that the property for the visitor center? No, that's the city's.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of the vendors in here.
Okay, I don't.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I believe that's the property where their office space is.
Okay.
Shelby may know. He knows everything.
He's had enough.
He's their next door neighbor.
The reason being he rents there, so I'm
Right,
assuming
he's the
he
next
would
door
know.
neighbor.
Do you, well, if he knows, let's.
I just have one quick question about something that Shelby had said earlier. We talked about, possibly going from $50 to $65,000 with the Stomp. But if over the last 5 or 6 years we've given the Visitors Bureau almost $3 million, wouldn't those props belong to the city to begin with? If we paid for those?
So that is among the asset questions that I've not yet researched.
Okay.
We were hoping that, in fact, again, I think this is contract 4 or 5 that we've negotiated over the last 6 weeks, and we were hoping that we were going to be able to, on a I'm going to call it friendly basis, avoid having to do additional research and demands about things like that. The terms of the contract, just in general, the cost for keeping the Visitor Information Center and the 2 employees working in the office had, at the end of July, been estimated at approximately $26,000. That cost, as I understand, has instead proven to be more in line with $15,000. So that was one of the terms, is that the city would continue to fund those 2 activities through the end of the year at that $15,000 number. We also talked about, if we get to the end of the year and the relationship between the SCVB and the city doesn't continue, that during the course of the next few months we would cooperate and do an inventory, cooperate and figure out what things there are, both both monetary and non-monetary assets. And then, and this is one that I think came up after I left town, but there was, there apparently is, I believe, $32,000 in a money market account that Zena mentioned we didn't have. I don't know much. I'll tell you, actually, I don't know anything about that, but that was one of the terms, was that particular fund should be returned to the city, because it seemed to be entirely made up of monies that had come from the city and had been put into a reserve account. And so, again, those were the 3 major terms of the proposed agreement. One of them, the assets one, if we have to figure out, legally who owns all that stuff, I'm going to have to do more research on the who owns all that stuff.
Thanks, Chip.
I guess I have another quick question. How would you characterize the negotiations with the contract? I mean, clearly we're on, what you said, iteration number 5? This is weird.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember DeJernis, I think that your term "weird" may be a good one. I was not extremely optimistic when I was last reporting to you on August the 12th. I then became very optimistic. I thought that we had something worked out. And again, since I returned last week to try and finish contract negotiations, the primary contact has been via email from the SCVB's attorney. I did attend their board meeting this morning. They said that they were going to send something for this evening, and as I understand, their attorney is not available today, and so they weren't able to send anything for this evening.
Does that mean that we're actually paying for their attorney as well?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Clark, so that's among the questions. The way I read the contracts, they can only expend money on things that are specifically listed in the contracts. It's one of the problems, though, with the old contract is I think there were a bunch of things that were not actually implemented in practice. And so there was some amount of money left over at the end of the FY 18-19 year, and Mr. Woodrow has been trying to find out what happened with that money, and so far we don't know what happened with that money.
Mr. Woodrow, would you like to comment on that? Is there a problem with the accounting over there in terms of the money that the city has given them and how they use the city funds versus money they might have received independently outside of the city? For example, advertising, and they've somehow commingled them?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember DeJarnis, the answer is yes, there might be a problem. It's, some of the county's accounting is unclear as to how
I think in
those monies
reality,
are spent.
we just don't know. That's the reality, is we haven't received answers to questions. So that's
after
really the
2
reality.
months, we still don't know anything.
Correct.
I'll just Google 'em.
Okay.
Did you want him to answer your questions? You had 2 questions. Shelby was going to
Oh,
say.
yes, I'm sorry. I already forgot about that.
You can forget. Mayor Toussaint, City Council, first of all, I have to thank Ed Skitt for having my back as far as getting us profit for a grape stomp. I appreciate that thought, Mr. Skitt. All I can let you know is that my landlord is Max Hamburg. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay.
As far as your question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Are there any questions of the staff report? With that, we'll go to public comment. Kim Jensen.
I want to put on my Kevlar vest for going through all this.
Stop.
So, first of all, to go back regarding the money, when it was asked for $10,000 for 6 years. When they asked for the money, the vendor list was for people the vendors for over 10,000 apiece. It wasn't asked for anything under that from individuals. So a lot of people who did do stuff, it was small amounts, under that 10,000, and that wasn't part of the request. So we had a lot of under 10,000s that were set up. So if you add those all up, you will go in there. Once you see that, you will see there's a bunch of individuals that have under 10,000, and that's the answer on that.
So, Kim, just so you know, I believe the issue there is the fact that this email dated by the city auditor was requesting an itemization of the not specified list. So I think that's what he's looking for, just to be very clear.
Right. Okay. The audit statements for both accounts and every check spent every month goes to the city, and they get that with the board's approval. So you see everything. And we try to be transparent. I mean, you're getting it through. It happened with Miss Featherstone. It happened with everyone before. So you can go back and look. I'm sorry that your auditor or whatever's missing, you might find that there's something suspicious. And again, I resent the inferment that we're trying to hide something from any of you, because we haven't been. We've been trying to be with the staff that we have, we're giving. Mr. Johnson, at our last meeting, stated to stop with the auditing, that it was a waste of time. And if we were to go through the RFP, that we can continue with that. And that was in our private meeting. So, you know, if you want to change your mind in front of everybody and tell them what you said, okay? Yay, well, you brought it up. You want me to get the hammer on this? Okay, so I'm just
Excuse me,
telling
Kim
you.
Jensen, I cannot entertain this right now.
Okay.
So
So,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
just telling you.
No, I'm going to be very clear with you right now. Daniel Johnson speaks for himself. If he told that, he does not control what this council's decision is. You may continue.
Okay. Going forward, as we said, we additionally we would like to have all of you listen, and from starting the 1st of September, we would like to do and finish through the end of December and run the program as we have the visitor center, as we have with the CVB, the information center, and Daniel, as well as Brenda Ball coming on board to help with promotions and the staffing, as well as the database. So we'd like to have that happen. We can't really go into detail until we have our city attorney Again, our attorney is not here to sue anybody. We're here as a defense to go with what we need to show you all. We can't talk about it at this time, and we would be willing if you came up with a tentative agreement, subject to our attorney's review with the SCVB. We'd like to ask for your approval, and then we would have a written agreement with you. With everything occurring tonight, I'm just trying to tell you that we have nothing to hide. With the staff we do have, we try to give you as much as we can. We'll try to explain to you further. We do not have a financial officer, and I don't have all the answers, but I do try to give you as much information as I can. And again, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll take this back to the council for discussion and action.
Just real quick regarding the issue, I am in favor if we can get something done, and what I expressed was if we can get a contract done and we can agree on the terms, I would love to not go back and rehash and waste more and more time. So that is actually accurate. What has happened is obviously we have not been able to get a contract done. So I don't know if we have to or not go back. Obviously, I don't want to spend the time or money doing that. But if we can't get a contract done, if we can't come to an agreement on the assets, I guess we have to move forward with it. So regarding what Mr. Jensen said.
I have a comment.
I think, oh, go ahead.
My only comment is, Kim, you're in a really tough spot right now, and I appreciate what you're doing, and a lot of people do. That's it.
Karen?
I would like to see this go forward. I don't want to have us rehash. I've seen very, very good organizations with wonderful volunteers and upstanding members of the community take the brunt of actions that boards of directors have caused, unbeknownst to them. And I'm not quite sure what has happened here, but I would like to move forward with this and try to get some sort of a contract going, because I feel that their services are very valuable to the city of Solvang.
So that, in regards to that is what we were trying to do. We actually had a contract drafted up, ready to move forward through December. And my understanding is that they do not like the contract. They will not accept the contract. And it is what it is. I mean, honestly, at this point, we've spent how many meetings, how much time, how much money trying to get this done. I don't see it going forward at all, personally. My recommendation is we terminate negotiations. We provide notice. We negotiate the assets. Obviously, I believe the assets belong to the city. We provided all the money for this. I say we authorize Chip and myself to negotiate this termination, and we staff the visitor center with a staffing agency has been recommended so that they can keep running for the time being, and move forward with finding someone to take over the Yule Fest and move on. I just don't know that it can be repaired at this point. I don't even think I don't know if they want to repair it, frankly. I don't know. I get the feeling that they don't. So.
Well, I mean, I think they do. I mean, we just had Mr. Jensen up here discussing that he feels that they've made efforts to disclose the finances that we've asked for. I wasn't privy to the meetings that you were in. I'm just listening to what I'm hearing in public. I'm not in a position where I would want to terminate this right off the bat. I would like to have another go at it, but I don't want to go into some sort of a forensic financial audit on this. The money's been spent, the money's
right.
gone.
And so by terminating.
And individuals that were involved in decision-making, they're gone. They're no longer with the organization.
That's right. That's why we tried to do that contract, was to keep it going, and they evidently don't feel that they can. I don't know if they can't do anything without their attorney present. And frankly, I don't even know where they're getting the money to pay the attorney. I have no idea,
So you were in the negotiations, right?
Correct.
How would you characterize the negotiations? Were they in good faith?
I kind of felt like we had something going when we left the meeting. Even as far as digital assets and assets, I felt like that was, we discussed that and that was decided. I didn't think that would be an issue. So I'm really not sure what the issue is. I'm just sick and tired of spending time, city time, council time discussing this.
Why can't they come back and participate in a future
They can.
RFP
They can.
in a different form?
Correct.
Would that work for you?
Yeah, I'd like to see them come back with an RFP.
Oh, they definitely can. Yeah.
Total reorganization of their organization with maybe new board members, new directors, new faces running the agency with a good RFP for us.
Well, look, I for one have had my issues with the Solvang Visitors Bureau. I thought that they could have done a better job over the years, and as David Gassaway explained to me, they probably should have done a better job. Unfortunately, the previous council didn't direct them sufficiently so they just did what they thought was best. No one told them what to do or how to do it. They didn't keep any metrics. They didn't keep the books apparently very clearly or cleanly. There's a lack of transparency and accountability, according to Mr. Woodrow. I think there's been a big question mark left, in my mind anyway, with respect to who owns what in terms of the physical and digital assets. Again, that's a problem with the contract. There were so many things that were wrong with this particular relationship and this contract. I'd like to see that completely terminated and then something new and something that makes more sense for this council and for this community produced. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I think I agree with you. If we can get them to agree to go ahead and terminate the relationship and move forward with in the RFP process, then I don't think there's any reason to continue auditing them, because we already know they've got a lot of compliance issues, potential conflicts of interest, and that's not going to look good for them or for the city, because our previous city staff failed to do their jobs. They should have been on top of this. Again, I'd like to move or second. I'm not even sure how to put this into words.
It's not a motion yet.
I'd like to put into motion whatever you said, because it was such a long and explanative answer.
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, Robert?
We're still in comment phase. My comment would be, I'd like the SVB, I'm not even thinking, it shouldn't matter, but it's like, Solvang kills tourism again. I'm getting really tired of hearing that, because what we want to do is promote Solvang in the best possible way with the right amount of money and with the right people. I have so much respect for Kim, and he put so much heart into it. I know it can't be fun to be here tonight, and I don't want to think like you're getting beat up, but I know how much Kim cares about this city. I know how hard he works. I know what his passion is, and it bothers me, because I know we've had problems in the past. I would like to see us continue with the SUV until the end of the year. If they want to fill out an RFP, then that's great. Let's work with Kim or any other group. I would vote for him going forward into the new year if that was the case. But my just opinion is, I'd like to get this out of the way, get this done, get Yule Fest finished, get through the end of the year, and then have an RFP if you guys want an RFP. That's my opinion.
I like that idea.
So then you're in favor of terminating the current relationship and creating a new one with, and then, in other words, not with them per se, but through an RFP process.
If that's the case, I would be fine to, this contract is through the end of the year, correct?
No, we would be terminating what's on the table.
The problem is they don't want the contract, so good luck.
Okay.
They don't want it. So we're back to meeting again in 2 weeks, where they'll probably say they don't want that contract. Then we're back to meeting again in 2 weeks, where they'll say they don't want that contract.
I'm
So
not interested in
until
going
we'll be,
At some point, you won't even have time
yeah,
to...
we're already running out
I
of
mean,
time.
Right.
you know, you have contracts, all these things do take time. So, I mean, at some point, you run out of time of, even if negotiations fail at the SCVB, we won't even have time to react to find someone that can take care of certain things.
I completely agree.
You know,
Remember, Ryan already spent, I don't know how many meetings talking about this stuff. Now I've spent how many meetings? You know, are we just going to keep doing this? You know, I mean...
And
Kim?
Okay, go ahead.
Kim, I'll allow you to approach.
The contract that we would want is the one we would continue with is what we've been using already for the last nearly 30 days. And we would continue with that. And it seems to have been going very well already. Wouldn't have been a problem. We would continue with that same number. And the one that Mr. Gassaway, Mr. Wilbrandt, and I all signed. And that was done at the beginning of the month. And that's the one we would continue with. That's what I'm looking at. I'm not
Okay.
looking at another contract. I'm looking at the grant contract that we've started here on the 1st of August. I would like to see that continued with our team through the end of December. Following that time, you'll probably do an RFP, but we'd like to see the consistency of our town not having to be brought through and having some other issues. We'd like to see Yule Fest get through. We're giving Stomp already, and that's what, and Shelby will do a great job with that. So I'd list to, this keeps consistency with the town. For the time being, you'll make your decisions at the appropriate time.
Thanks.
Chip, can you please explain that? I thought that we received an email from the attorney for the SVB stating exactly the opposite, but
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I frankly am not sure what the email on Friday said. I have reached out. I reached out in July, I guess it was, and didn't get a reply back to the last time we had negotiations. I reached out on Friday, didn't get a response back. I don't know that I understand the current proposal. I went to the board meeting yesterday. I tried to explain that amongst the things, for example, when we all, because this was actually an interim contract that was within the city manager's signing purview, and so it was approved on that basis, very clearly though with the intent that it only be on an interim basis so that we could spend probably less than a month getting something permanent in place. I, for example, when I went to the meeting this morning, noted that they provided it was called, I think it was an income and expense statement. It was a statement of monies that they've received and expended in the month of August so far, so through August 20th, I believe. The amounts that were shown on the budget that we had July the 30th that was used for that interim contract are inconsistent with the expenditures that I then saw this morning. And as I started looking in more detail, for example, some of the things that were shown on July the 30th were double shown. There were, for example, two $1,200 amounts for a CPA. I don't see any CPA expenditure actually occurring in August, let alone two $1,200 amounts for a CPA. There were two $400 amounts for a bookkeeper. There were double amounts for other things. Again, the budget that was provided for July the 30th doesn't seem to have been particularly well done. I'm not faulting any of the board members, so I hope that, that all of you and people at home understand. I'm not faulting any of the board members. That budget I don't think was prepared by any of the board members, but that budget doesn't make sense. We had discussions on August the 13th. The amount that we were presented on August the 13th to keep the visitor center and those two staff members working was $15,000 total, not $26,400 and something. So there certainly is that question. I also note on the sheet that I got yesterday that I had to ask for, there is a footnote in it, or a notation, that they collected $1,000 from ad boards, but they're not continuing to actually send out renewal notices for the ad boards. And it says, I think, for obvious reasons. Those reasons certainly aren't obvious to me why they're not actually continuing to collect money that would go to helping to support this. They're just, and I'm not saying these aren't things that can't be worked out if I knew who to talk to and work them out. They are things that I thought we had gotten worked out. And again, I think that Councilmember Johnson and I are both very frustrated because instead of us meeting last week when we had the chance, I got an email that said this is unacceptable, just give us some other amount of money. And I don't know how or where to go with that. If there is a place, again, I was very optimistic on August the 13th. I was actually fairly optimistic on August the 19th. I'd love to be optimistic. I just am finding myself not optimistic because when I raise these very, to me, relatively simple items about dollar amounts in a budget, I can't get a response. So I know that was a very long expression of frustration.
To sum it up,
but that's where I am.
I found the email from Jack Collison. It says, quote, although I could outline our specific objections to several paragraphs of the city's proposal, the bottom line is it is not acceptable to the SCVB. Many of these items that are now included in the city's proposal had, we thought, been removed for further consideration after some lengthy good faith negotiations, as evidenced by our submittal of a proposed contract to be considered by the City Council on July 23rd, 2019, but then rejected by the City Council. So as far as I'm concerned, even the date he's listing is that basically all the negotiations that we've just had over the past over 30 days are nothing.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you, I think, have quite well expressed my frustration on receiving.
So, I mean, as far as I can see it, that's just a complete waste of our time. It's a complete waste of your attorney fees. And as I'm looking over this audit report here by Thomas Woodrow, a lot of these items that he's requesting for are actually very simple. IRS transcripts, call the IRS, they mail them out. Itemization of vendor, all these things, that's pull up QuickBooks. Itemization not specified, pull up QuickBooks, print it out, boom, done. I mean, I think that I could probably do all this in probably about 30 minutes. Probably not including the call to the IRS because that could take a few hours just to get a hold, but after that, probably only 20 minutes.
I have to agree with the mayor. I think they have not been negotiating in good faith. Maybe it's because they don't know how. I mean, you can't go through 5 or 6 iterations. I think we just got a new proposal from Kim this evening. Well, that would be the 6th one. I don't know how
the chamber was one hour meeting and done.
I think they have massive problems with compliance, and from the city standpoint, I mean, I for one can't go along with voting for new funds for a group that has some compliance issues that need to be resolved before they get any new funds. I think they need to clean up their accounting and become much more transparent and accountable. Again, they don't have the time to do this with respect to the contract and accounting issues. I think Daniel's suggestion is probably the simplest, cleanest way to move forward, and then let them participate in a new RFP process along with anyone else who wants to compete for that.
Mm-hmm.
Any more discussion?
And I did go back through these audit reports from the prior auditor. I'm finding these quote unquote miscellaneous cash debits, $2,000. And then it says in the report, no backup. I don't see anything here that anything was, here it says Edward Jones and TD Ameritrade, wire invoices, old invoices with handwritten alterations. That's quote unquote from the city auditor. Again, no answers. So I just don't know what even was going on in the past with regard to any checks and balances here. But
So,
go ahead.
So am I understanding that they have no funds left to complete any of the events through the end of the year?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Waite, I'm sorry, but I don't know.
We don't know.
We've asked, and I don't know. So the number of things, and I don't think that, you know, I'm not casting aspersions again, but the number of things where I ask questions like, what's the difference between $15,000 and $26,000? I truly, after spending probably well over 100 hours on this, I don't know.
Okay, because I think, I believe that Councilmember Clark and I are,
Sorry, I just find this question interesting.
Councilmember Clark and I are trying to possibly determine the same thing. If they have the funds to continue through the end of the year and then go through an RFP process. Because in order to, keep the consistency of our tourist events that we've traditionally done for years, if they had the funding to do that and they weren't asking for additional funding, that's what I would be in favor of. So I don't know if Mr. Jensen can answer this question, if he has the authority to answer this question, but I would like to know.
And if I could add to that, my goal is to, because I trust Kim, is to have Kim in charge of this until the end of the year, then get an RFP. And I hate to say this, but can we have a meeting with just Kim? During the week and sit down and go, how do we get the SCVB and us through the end of the year?
We did that.
So you want to continue to negotiate with somebody who is not really operating in good faith?
Well,
Somebody
there
who has
was other
massive
people. There was other
compliance
people there.
issues
Anyway, so that's.
and has problems with accounting.
I
And
get
this
it.
is a good idea.
I get it. I get trying to resolve this. I cannot give over $26,000 to an organization that it can't account for it.
That's what I'm trying to say. Is the $26,000 an additional amount that they are asking for
Yes,
on top of
they're asking for $26,000 every month through the end of the year.
Plus money for the Yule Fest.
On top of that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Waite, and again, if I understand what they said, they discussed this morning, and one of the problems is that then that was supposed to get put into writing, and it hasn't gotten put into writing because their attorney is unavailable. As I understand, and I'd love to have this clarified, but they wanted to continue to receive the $26,000 plus another, I believe, $4,000 something a month for Brenda Ball. And that would continue for the rest of the year. Plus, they wanted approximately $26,000 for Yule Fest. And then they wanted to separately negotiate about any return of assets, including digital or other assets. I received from their board packet yesterday their expenditures through August the 20th. When I add to the expenditures through August 20th, the additional monies and payroll taxes that would be paid on August the 30th, I get a total of approximately $14,000, not 26. And so, again, I'm back to, I just end up with more questions than I have answers. I believe that these are people trying to work in good faith. I don't know why. I've been trying to work in good faith, I can guarantee that. I believe, I know that Councilmember Johnson was working in good faith. I can't figure out why the buses keep missing each other.
It still doesn't answer my question.
What is your specific question?
My specific question was, do they, at this point, have enough money to finish the events that had been planned from here until the end of the year? It's a similar question that we asked other agencies. It's like, how much money do you need to finish off the rest of the year?
So we know that they had over $100,000 on July 1st. We have no idea what their cash balance is now.
So,
But at the end of July, they had about $44,000.
okay, so then the question.
And we gave them another $26,000. They've spent $8,000 of that. So they should have, $18,000, $20,000. Whether they do or not, we have no idea.
Okay, so then the question would be, do you have enough money to continue the events that you've traditionally done
For
between now
$20,000?
until the end of the year? That would be the
That's
question.
not, I bet you I could almost answer for them. That's not enough money.
Why not let Kim answer that?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any proposed motions to get
I
this
have a
moving
motion.
forward? Okay,
But if there's still discussion, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
let's hear your motion.
Are you sure, Karen? You don't have any other questions?
No.
I don't want to cut you off. So I'm going to make the motion to terminate negotiations with the SCVB, provide notice for return and transfer of public assets, including the city funds and non-monetary assets and physical assets. Authorize myself and the city attorney to seek an alternative service provider, which may be a staffing agency, to keep the visitors information center staffed without interruption, preferably utilizing existing VIC specialists at an amount not to exceed the net cost of the city of $8,500 a month, and to work with the city manager to enter into such an agreement for a period at least until the next council meeting, and to report back at that time, and seek alternative providers for Yule Fest services.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Dearness?
Yes.
Clark?
No.
Wait.
No.
Mayor Toussaint?
Yes. With that, we move on to item number 9. I'm going to call for a 10-minute restroom break.
Yeah, and I'll just, if I see that, then I'll take a picture of it.
Okay, perfect. We do have a website that has information.
Boys just wanted to come see me.
All right, I'd like to reconvene the meeting. We have item number 9. Lisa, could I get a title report and readout, and then a staff report?
Item 9, creation of a building department amnesty program for the city of Solvang.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. We are here tonight for the consideration of a recommendation tonight from staff. It's as follows. Adopt a resolution and give direction to staff regarding the initiation of and details for a building department amnesty program to be offered to customers for any construction work completed without the required permits. The International Building Code states that any work done without a permit should be subject to a fee that's in our fee schedule. Currently, the fee for unpermitted work is $500, is listed under building permits required in the City of Solvang fees, charges, and fines. The request of City Council, the Planning Director researched the potential of implementing a building department amnesty program for Solvang. Staff research identified a number of cities and counties that offer similar programs, and that is in your attachment to this report. All the programs seem to have a common purpose, which is to provide property owners the opportunity to apply for permits for buildings, additions, and remodels where unpermitted work had been done without application of the penalty fee for unpermitted work. The unpermitted work may have happened because the applicant was unaware that they needed a permit, or they may have just purchased or leased the property where unpermitted work was inherited with the property on site. So why is it good to get a permit? In certain cases, such as electrical work or plumbing work, it can be a life or safety issue. Unpermitted work can also complicate a real estate transaction, as many banks require a clear record of permits on site before financing can be completed. There's several pluses to an amnesty program, and they would be the following. It would offer an opportunity to educate the public about building codes through outreach activities. And it would also give the applicants information about the history of their particular property with recommended actions to take to correct the unpermitted work. All the programs studied waived the investigation fee or the penalty fee, which is set by that particular jurisdiction for work without a permit. The intent is not to waive permit fees, but to waive the penalty fee for work without a permit, which, as I mentioned, was the $500 in Solvang. And secondly, most programs included residential permits only, not commercial properties. An amnesty program for residential properties ensures that the value of that program serves residents and taxpayers of that city, not necessarily outside investors in commercial properties. For Solvang, an amnesty program would, for an identified time period, safety issues caused by unpermitted work. Building permits will still be required to bring that unpermitted work into compliance. So, as to alternatives, you have this in your packet, and I will reiterate these for the record. Council could offer an amnesty program for the month of October 2019 as an experiment to measure the interest level or the response level in the community. It could also allow staff to assess the resources needed to fulfill a program of this type. If successful, it could be offered again in May 2020, which happens to be Building Safety Month, and that could be rolled into a larger month of outreach, maybe with classes or open house, perhaps, to educate people about building safety. Council could also offer this program for a longer time period. It could limit the program to residential construction or expand it to commercial construction as well. Council could also offer an inspection to ensure compliance with the building and safety code, and this would give the applicant an assessment as to time and resources needed to bring the property into compliance. Council could request a combination of these alternatives, or they could choose not to implement an amnesty program at this time. So that concludes my staff report. We have a table of selected cities that offered those amnesty programs. There is a sample informational flyer for Amnesty Month that I included that San Rafael has that we would change and to reflect Solvang's intentions and get the word out that way. I'm sure we could also give it to our PIO liaison for distribution. So that concludes my staff report. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
Yeah, you know, and I hate to admit this, but I had not even entertained commercial when I first brought this idea up, because I hear it more from residential builders, because they're usually not as astute and as sophisticated as commercial builders.
True.
So a lot of them find out they need a permit afterwards when they go to sell the house, things like that. But what we're saying here, the commercial is not included in this.
It's up to you
Prerogative,
whether you
correct.
include it or not.
Yeah.
Most of the programs do not include commercial. A few do, but I think the intent was to benefit the residents and the taxpayers of the jurisdiction.
And I would like to keep that out. And to clarify something that I had heard people say, they thought, some people in town thought this was a free ticket to build something without a permit. But it's not the case, and I'm sure that everybody knows that now, and that'll also be part of our education. Now, you were saying November and May, which is National Safety Month?
It was a recommendation. You certainly can change that. I mean, October, when I wrote this,
Or October,
you know,
yeah.
it was a month or so ago, and so November, you know, October's coming up now. We could turn that around and try to make that happen. November might give us a little more time to put that into place.
Yeah, my guess, I would not want to do this that fast. Plus, it'll give us some time to get the word out.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's my last
Thank you.
question.
Are there any other questions of the staff report?
Yeah, how far back are we going? Or, I mean, is this just open to anyone who knows that they happen to be living in a home that possibly didn't have correct permitting?
It can go back as long as you know, as it's needed to bring it up into compliance. And there is a question as to whether or not the building code that applied during that time would be the one that would prevail, given the results of an inspection. So, you know, we have a dialogue to have with our building services provider to make sure that we understand, you know, what people would be expected if they had one of these inspections at city expense.
So otherwise, if people do not come forward, and they, you know, of course, go to sell their residence, it's going to come up at that point.
It may.
It may.
It depends on the depth of the home inspection that
Can I add
is
to
required.
that? A lot of times, if somebody adds a fourth bedroom and they go to sell the house, not so much they can get in trouble with the city, but it would be listed as a 3-bedroom house.
And it's usually listed in the MLS as unpermitted work, which is not an incentive necessarily for some buyers. So it's an opportunity for people to sort of get clean, you know, create a new baseline, and move on from there.
And how much would this cost to include commercial?
That's unknown. We would.
My understanding.
Well, basically, what is a commercial penalty right now?
The commercial penalty is the same as the residential penalty. It is $500.
Well, that wouldn't be a horrible idea.
And my understanding is that a lot of contractors have had issues. They go in to repair a commercial building and they find all kinds of problems that were left from previous owners, right?
Or they go in a commercial building to fix something, and then while they're there, the guy says, "Could you mind putting a bathroom over there?" And that's where people get into trouble.
Right. I'd like to include that.
You know, actually, if it's just a penalty, you're right. I don't think there's a can of worms that can be opened by offering it to commercial. I don't think we'd see many of them.
That's and hence the advantage of rolling out a trial period to assess, you know, the costs, to assess the response, and move on from there with those results.
I notice here that you've got, and I didn't know this because I talked to maybe 5 or 6 cities when I was studying this myself, but for example, Hialeah in Florida waives the permit and a 50% cost in reducing the new permit. Is that right?
That is apparently, they may have an issue where they want to create strong incentives. They may have a big compliance issue, and so they may want to bring those non-compliant properties forward. I'm guessing that Solvang is not in that situation.
I don't think so. Then that could also open another can of worms.
Right, and Hialeah is much bigger.
And then I think it would make other builders go, well, wait a minute, why did I pay the same price for a 3,000 square foot structure?
Exactly. I think you need to be, cautious and as you roll this out to see what the response is. And you have a lot of compliant people in this community. Maybe it's just their work ethic or their values, but there are a lot of people who've paid decent money to do the right thing. And what you don't want, I think, is to create an incentive where people can say, well, I'll just wait till the next opportunity.
Yeah.
$500, on the other hand, it's not, a huge amount of money.
Well, so we're not just talking about $500, though. We're talking about that's $500 when they come forward and they disclose that they have unpermitted work done. With a business, you could be talking, well, and with the residents, but with the business, you could be talking, thousands to bring it into compliance.
Oh, no, this has nothing to do with bringing it into compliance, though. It's just a matter of the penalty that they were assessed.
Well, not really.
They're gonna have to pay
Correct.
permit
They will.
fees to
And a lot of them might not
permit
come
fees.
forward.
bring this into compliance.
Yes.
And my concern is that could be detrimental to some small businesses to the point where it could possibly put them out of business.
And then those people would not come forward. There's people that, have a small issue, but they're still not going to come forward. They just don't want to, it's just a matter of people that want to get their buildings up to code.
And I think really the strength of these programs that cities have emphasized is education, and education especially for residential customers who don't really know what's permitted and what's not. They maybe they did a water heater and they found out later, well, I should have gotten a permit for that. It's just their opportunity to come clean, get the real estate record straight, and move on from there.
So I think we have to be very, very clear to the public that it's not, pay your $500 home free. It's pay your $500 because you're not compliant, and then you have to upgrade your property.
Yeah, they pay the regular permits.
I'm trying to get this down to questions of the staff report, and I feel like we're starting to kind of go off of that.
Yeah, we're in.
Are there any other
council
questions of the staff report? Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to sound like a grumpy attorney. This sounds like a wonderful idea, but if I understand, the recommendation is to adopt this resolution this evening, and you've heard a bunch of ideas for how the program would work, but they're not in the resolution. And I think before you can adopt a resolution, you need to give direction so that, for example, is this for October and May? Is this, the resolution is your council passing a law, and those things need to be actually in the law that you pass.
Right.
Okay.
With that, we'll go to public comment.
If I could respond, resolutions are always corrected to reflect the council's direction before they're finalized.
Thank you.
Okay. I have no public speakers. With that, we'll take it back to the council for discussion and action. Who would like to start?
Well, I think it needs a little more clarity, as Chip was explaining, in terms of should we add commercial, and when are we going to have these programs? How do we direct staff to do that? Do we just tell them to continue on with this process?
Yeah. My view on this is doing an amnesty program is really about trying to turn the tables with the planning department and build community trust in a situation in which case people can come to a customer service oriented department with problems that they might have. We have several reasons that have all been mentioned just within your own questions. You have businesses that have unpermitted work. You have residences that you might have bought a home that has unpermitted work. Maybe you did unpermitted work. However it happens, it's providing an opportunity, and I think this is really key. We need to provide an opportunity for people to feel like they can safely approach the city of Solvang and say, hey, I have these issues. What is the best way I can get them permitted and come into compliance? I mean, that's really what this is about. If you're going to try to, bring up the health and safety for the community and get people to have permitted work. There's lots of issues where people do unpermitted work, then they sell the house, and then the next person, now gets that burden brought onto them. So it's about providing those kinds of opportunities. Now, in that, how is someone going to feel safe? I think there's lots of things that have to be addressed here. How would someone feel safe if they had unpermitted work and they went to the planning department and said, hey, I've got this unpermitted work at my business or my home, and I would like to find a way to, government code is very complicated. Our staff knows the code better than anyone else, and it's our job as government to help walk people through these processes to bring them into compliance in the most efficient way without causing some crazy financial burdens. It's not just even the cost of permits, it's the processes that we go through and the consultants that are hired through that process. So with that, a lot of these things need to be addressed. What if Robert came to the city tomorrow and said, I have unpermitted work in my home, and I would like to bring into compliance? And let's say they lay out, and it just seems unreasonable. The cost is too high, he can't do it. Does that mean that code enforcement immediately chases him the day after? We have to address these questions, but just so that people understand that it's a safe environment to walk in and talk to the city about these needs and make sure, because that's the perception that we have to deal with, and that's how they're going to feel. They're going to feel like, oh, gee, I come in here, it's already a daunting process. Am I then going to get prosecuted after if I, don't get something permitted?
Well, and I think that's where, with this amnesty program, someone comes in, we're waiving those fines, and we're looking to work with them to get their property into compliance.
And I just want to make that very, very clear that that's what this is about.
But if I could add too, when they come in and ask that same question, and then they find out it's going to cost, $600,000 to get that one-bedroom apartment up to code, they're going to go, forget it.
Right.
And then they're still in the same boat, but then the city knows it's there.
And that's the thing that I'm trying to address right there is, does that then go in their file and then, the amnesty, new code enforcement gets hired, something 2 years later, and here's your file. Oh, gee, Robert Clark has, let's go over there and knock on the door.
But they do have the knowledge that now that they have that unpermitted work, what they do with that is, is up to them. I think what this does is a real opportunity is to create a safe place for people to get their questions answered, and perhaps what would be best would be an open house where we explain in general this program. It could be from 5 to 7 on a Wednesday night, and widely advertised, and they come in and we have all the answers that to the questions that might come up. At least we hope we will. And we roll out with that.
Has that ever been done before, an open house, as you described?
Yes, actually it has. A couple of years ago, before my time, but I think there was even wine involved.
Nice.
After 5.
But I can just see it now. I have a friend that has a house on Fjord, and
well,
he built this thing in his backyard.
Well, actually, first of all, I want to thank you.
That can happen anytime.
I know.
I want to thank you for the staff report. I think
Thank
you did a great job. And secondly, I'm trying to move this forward. That's why I asked the question, what do we need to direct staff to do? Because I'm not ready to vote on this.
Well,
Not with more clarity.
In my perspective, in reading the staff report, I think it's a little light and undeveloped. I think we need to spend more time, maybe give a little direction to staff. Do we want to include commercial? I think these are all, things that we should give that feedback with right now. And I would really like to see more comparative amnesty programs of different cities. I'm just going to presume this, but I'd presume that different cities implement amnesty programs for probably different reasons. They identify they have a certain pattern or rampant issue or whatever, and their amnesty program is probably more geared towards what that issue is. I think we should evaluate some more of these and, come up with a little bit more detailed of a staff report that really addresses some of these things. Personally, I would like to include businesses. I mean, this is a health and safety thing. It seems like they should be able to come in there and work comfortably. This is about trying to turn the tables of the planning department and make people feel that this is a customer service oriented planning department where we're here to help and serve our customers. So my position would be to give some feedback on this and then table the item for staff to come back at a later date with a more detailed report with more comparative amnesty programs.
I would certainly like to see an open house done in May. Is that when you have the open?
That's Building Safety Month, so.
Can we do that on an annual basis and come back with costs associated with that? I think we need to do that for the next couple of years anyway to help people understand we're serious about amnesty.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to find out exactly how many people are even interested in this program? I mean, I know we've heard a lot of talk about it, but is there any way to find out like an actual number?
This is anecdotal, but every city that I spoke to that offered this, the person was in the planning department was as cheerful as could be and was as happy as can be about it, and the reception
A
to
lot
their
of participation.
communities. Sonoma, Cook County.
Please keep speaking into the mic.
Yes, but anyway, that was my, and you've talked to more people than I did, obviously, that they said it was a good public relations as well as a good community involvement.
Right, and mostly an opportunity for education and outreach. Too.
What about
People know what-
participation? Participation, is there any numbers on that?
No, I mean, I think it depended on the jurisdiction. There's some, and I didn't select by size of city.
Right.
I just
Now, you
selected
actually talked
by
to Clark County,
participation.
I see.
Right, which is huge. They do 53,000 permits a year.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was a number. It was crazy.
So could we run this, for example, from October, as you suggested, all the way through the end of May?
That could be a council recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm open to a longer period of time especially initially to give it some time to get some traction. And I think part of it too is I think that we need some wins. We need some success cases so that people feel comfortable. Oh, gee, hey, there's this great program. Let me go take advantage of it. Hey, I have a ADU in my backyard, and staff can simply say, hey, look at this new state law over here. There's like 4 of them, and an ADU is actually very easy now to get permitted.
Okay, I think this is a great start, and we should go with Ryan's advice and give it some more detail and bring it back.
So just to clarify, I hear you're interested in commercial, you want to see some open houses, you'd like to see a little bit longer time frame than 1 month. And is there anything else you would like to see specifically within a program?
I'd like to see some of this put on the website. I mean, as we do the open houses, videotape it, basically clean it up, and then people can go back to this time and again and maybe get their questions answered that way.
And maybe our PIO could put together some little survey that's put out there or something to get some public engagement over some of the issues that they have that they would like addressed in the amnesty program. There might be things that we just don't think about right here. And that would be kind of part of the awareness campaign that would lead up to the amnesty program.
So you're saying that you would want the PAO, the outreach in the form of a questionnaire or something like that before the amnesty program was put together?
Yeah. We could even do a water bill insert or, something. There's different things that we could.
Yeah, lots of ways
Good
we can go
example
about
right
that.
here.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. That was well written, and that's part of the reason I included it. So.
Perfect. Do we need a motion on that or just staff direction? We'll move on to the next item.
Direction works.
Direction.
And I think are we including businesses? You have that noted down?
Yes.
Yeah, commercial, okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Oh, on that one item right there, I had some notes kind of on the same subject, but I would like it if our city attorney could spend just a little bit of time researching something around like maybe a blight ordinance or something like that for the city of Solvang. I think that actually could run hand in hand with an amnesty program because we do have several vacant buildings and it's not doing anything for our community. We probably look into.
Yeah, we have a blight program. and our code enforcement is active on enforcing that.
Okay, I think we should just evaluate the ordinance or something like that. So I'd just like to know from our city attorney if there's anything that could be strengthened with that to address some of these things.
All
right. On to item 10.
Item 10, City Council Goals and Action Plan.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, David Gassaway, City Manager. Excited to present to you an action plan document that speaks to the City Council goals. As I'm sure you all remember, on June 22nd, we spent all day together over at Hotel Cork, and the council came up with 8 goals in a document form where you identified your 3 major goals as develop fiscal policies that guide use of city resources, determine future financial needs and required revenues and other funding sources, including reserve requirements, and develop and evaluate capital and operational options for new water and wastewater treatment services. In addition to that, there were 5 other important goals: create a master plan for Solvang's future, be more effective by doing more with less, enhance walkability, safety, and enjoyment of public spaces, streets and spaces, spruce up Solvang Park and make it more useful for events, and enhance public engagement. Since that time, at the end of July, the executive team and I, which is the department heads and myself, went on our own retreat so that we could start talking through the City Council goals as well as the statements that you had made under each of those goals that gave some direction. And we came up with the document that's before you today, starting on page 328 of your agenda packet, which identifies a little bit more detail as to how we look to move forward in implementing your goals. Ultimately, I want to just point out that this document is really intended as a living document. You know, we don't even want to pretend as though by spending one day talking about these council goals that staff was able to determine all of the things that this city council wants as it relates to the topics that were discussed and the major and other important goals identified on the 22nd. So as this is a living document, ultimately tonight what we're most interested in is hearing what City Council's thoughts are and on whether or not we produced a document that you think helps to follow what your intentions were with each of these goals. We want to know if we got things right. Is there anything that we misheard from you on the 22nd? Are there specific initiatives or subtasks that perhaps you were thinking in your mind was something that needed to happen under one of the goals? Or is there anything that we identified as a specific initiative or subtask that you don't think is all that important, so that we don't end up wasting any time or resources? The overall structure of the document is that it identifies the goals. We tried to color coordinate them each so that, and we provided a number to them so that they're easy to reference in the future. Underneath each goal then, we started identifying specific initiatives and subtasks. So for example, goal number 1, which is develop fiscal policies that guide use of city resources, down under the action plan then has A as a specific initiative and then A1 as a specific task, so that in the future, as we're referring to specific goals, we can refer to goal 1A1, and that would easily identify in a staff report on a future agenda that we're discussing strategic goals and financial plan development as is identified in the plan document. So one example of a goal that we would hope for this type of direction and discussion, if you went to page 351 of your agenda package, which is goal 7. Goal 7 is to spruce up Solvang Park. Under that goal, we have goal 7D1. So we would follow 7 down to D, upgrade the parks to enhance Solvang feel and experience. And then subtask 1 is a redesign of Solvang Park to better serve the community, visitors, and benefit special events. Under that goal, one of the things that Fred Lagaman, our Parks and Rec Director, has already started doing was sketching out some different alternatives, very rough drafts of which I think I've shared with all of you in one-on-ones. Now, for example, that's a goal where there's a lot that goes into a redo of Solvang Park. Under this document, what we've done for you is we've identified some preliminary timeframes and costs for 7D1, which would be fall of 2019, as identified on page 352, as well as $35,000 to $50,000 in costs. Now, for our staff to do some preliminary sketches, we're not saying that would cost $35,000 to $50,000, but if we went through a community engagement, as we intend to do, gathered feedback on what a redo of Solvang Park would look like, then we would expect to spend somewhere in the $35,000 to $50,000 range in order to put together the detailed landscape architecture plans that would be required in order to authorize and move forward with a project. And at that point in time, we could identify much more closely what costs would be. With that goal, for example, there are other dynamics at play that we must explore. So as you know, there's a group out there right now led by Mr. John Martino, Ben Olson, and Alan Needham, as well as the Chamber of Commerce, that's raising funds to replace and put in a new live Christmas tree in Solvang Park. One of the concepts that we began looking at from a staff perspective would include building out a much larger, much more grandiose Christmas tree plaza with hardscape surrounding that, surrounding the new Christmas tree, so it really becomes an emphasis within Solvang Park. In order to do that, though, we have a timing issue as they're looking to move forward with their Christmas tree on October 1st. And so we did already meet with them, and they identified some alternatives. Actually, Alan Valley Gardner identified that he could plant it in a box for the year, and that if council then at a later date wanted to move forward with the project, you identified everything that you wanted into this park, we identified the funding needed, and you authorized that project, then it would be movable. So that's an example of things that are coming down the pipe where certainly the items that we identify here in this document may not have all of the specificity today to help make every single decision, but as we progress through the plan, then we'll be certainly looking to come back and have those conversations, make sure we're engaging the community on a lot of these items as identified under Goal 8 and progressing through. The goal document then, after each of these sections, identifies specific actions, a timeline, and estimated cost, as I pointed out. Anything that is bold and italicized is a cost that we have not yet budgeted. So in the adopted 2019-20 budget, there is a number of items that are already into this goal document that you have budgeted for. If you go to page 363 of your agenda packet, what we did is we pulled every single initiative or subtask from each goal. So 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8 identify some additional costs, and we've taken anything that was bolded and italicized and we summarized it on this one page so that at a glance you could see tonight what is not currently budgeted, but that are a part of what staff felt were initiatives needed in order to deliver on your goals. The total cost for all of those items is just over $3.1 million. I will point out that the two largest costs in that $3.1 million is nearly $1.2 million for the wastewater treatment plant engineering. So goal 3A3 is $1.175 million, as well as we had an assessment done on the playground at Solvang Park. It gave a range of costs for either doing repairs currently to that playground or funding a major rehabilitation project up to, I believe, including a complete redo of that park apparatus, which the consultant estimated at $670,000. So
Sunnyfields Park.
Sunnyfields,
Yeah.
yes. And so those two items alone are things that we've included in here just for purposes of trying to identify the costs on everything, but they do represent more than 60% of that $3.1 million. Under your current budget, you had around a $595,000 surplus in the general fund that you approved when you approved the budget document. However, that did include $600,000 in funding for the CVB and $150,000 for the Chamber of Commerce. As of current, just prior item, you have come in significantly under that at this point in time from those $750,000 for the CVB and Chamber. So that does increase the amount of undesignated fund balance or undesignated surplus you would have out of the general fund in this year.
But we still have to address getting those events done. That does come with a cost.
Absolutely, yeah. So then the third bit of information, just to point you to here, is we tried to, on page 361 and 362, use a Gantt chart style of look at all of these projects. And so the pages 361 and 362 try to do at a glance all of the goals and initiatives in here, and try to identify when they would be delivered on the back end for finalization, but helps to identify when we believe we would need to start on each of these tasks in order to get the workload rolling. Some of them work their way into future years, just because we recognize that we're just not capable of completing them all. For example, Goal 8E on page 362, we wouldn't even be looking to start until the fall of 2020. That really is the community engagement and strategic planning process that would be the lead-in to what we're recommending as the two-year budget cycle. So we would do a comprehensive, about this time next year, do a comprehensive community engagement for the goal-setting session for that coming fiscal year, the year after 2020, the 21-22 goal-setting period, and that would be the time frame in which we would roll into a two-year budget, so it matched with the election cycles. So each November you have elections, new city councils get sworn in December, and then starting in January, you're into a budget process to adopt a budget that starts July 1, and that would then be a two-year budget starting in 2021 through 2023. So it gets into a good timing rhythm, which is a best practice. So with that, I'll stop here and look to you for any questions about any of the specific items that are listed in the document, or any questions about structure or flow or implementation. That concludes my presentation, and I'm certainly available for questions.
What is it that Sunnyfields Park needs $600,000 for?
It's the playground structure.
That playground structure.
That playground structure.
$600,000.
Yes. Well, it's a rather large playground structure to start with, and right now the playground structure is all wood. It's all wood construction playground, which most playground structures, if you've noticed, usually have steel for the supports and then some sort of composite material for the apparatus that the kids climb on. And so, yes, sir.
I would hope to, my company donated and not donated, gave it cost a whole bunch of material of Trex decking for that. So there is some composite material in that.
Yes.
And it has a 20-year warranty. I would hope that some of that can get reused.
Yeah, we would look into all of those dynamics depending on how we want to move forward. I also recognize that I believe all of the Valley Rotary clubs have been pretty actively involved in maintaining that playground structure to date. What we're trying to provide for you on that $670,000 is a worst-case scenario. So the consultant that is an expert, and they go all over the country doing playground assessments, they gave us that as if we wanted to just have a full turnkey redo of that playground, that's what their estimate of that cost would be.
What's the cost of the consultant?
Oh, off the top of my
Is that
head, I don't know.
300,000 of the 600?
No, I don't know.
Wasn't there another option as far as refurbishing it?
Yes, and that was much less expensive,
right.
Just for doing some of that maintenance, which is Fred could speak to it in more depth, but I think it was replacement of some posts,
right.
replacement of some of the deck topping, the Trek deck, just from wear and tear perspective.
Yeah.
Has there been any thoughts with respect to the staff communicating with some of the civic groups to raise funds for this project in conjunction with the city?
Absolutely. I want to just really highlight that this is like the preliminary stage at this point in time. So we're identifying in here, so if we go to page 352, to look at the Solvang Park. Let me just get exactly which one that was. Sunnyfield Park, Sunnyfield Park. So that would be 7E. So 7E, we're identifying that we would begin some process of looking at that project here in winter of 2019, sometime in December, and that would then provide the opportunity for us to start analyzing all of the different options available to us and bringing those conversations to you, as well as those civic groups and the public at large who utilize the playground, so that we're gathering broad community input into what's desired for that project.
Right, because there's a lot less expensive way to refurbish it and let it last for another 5-10 years while we're trying to spend all the money doing the wastewater treatment plant, which makes more sense. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, could you repeat yourself?
There's other ways to spend a lot less money to refurbish Sunnyfield Park without spending the $600,000, because obviously we have to pay for a wastewater treatment plant at this time. So in 5 to 10 years, then we can discuss major replacements.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if there's a way to extend it, I would be in favor of that, especially, we haven't even talked about replacing the sewer collection system, which is another $3 million problem we have to consider. So I take your point.
So does Fred have any comment on refurbishing?
Well, I don't know that we need to even discuss this right now. We're not making this decision. He's just saying.
I'm just curious, you know. Fred?
Go ahead, Fred.
Can we incorporate a playground into the wastewater treatment plant?
Yes.
We have an additional 2.5 acres.
Chutes and ladders.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Johnson was correct. The range of costs are $88,000 all the way up to $670,000. And as the city manager pointed out, $670,000 is a turnkey, brand new playground. Everything you see there is gone, and it's all brand new material. And as Councilmember Clark talked about the Trex, that is still there and working, but the posts are all wood.
Yeah.
So those would be the basic cost to repair.
Great.
And that's kind of amazing, because it was 14, if I wasn't mistaken, it was 2004?
2005 was when we finished.
2005,
Yep,
because I remember
May,
that.
May of that year.
So we get 15 years out of a pretty expensive playground. And there was so much community involvement in getting that thing built in the first place. So that $600,000 doesn't scare me, because we would do the same thing again.
Well, the lower end costs include a community build. The
Okay.
670 is a company coming in turnkey. And as to the mayor's question about the assessment, that was done from the original builder out of New York, and the assessment was about $1,400, and we finished it a couple months ago.
Dave, I got a question about, it's item 3.A.3. I think it's related to the sewer, the wastewater treatment plant, the engineering for the wastewater treatment plant. Can you
Yes.
elaborate on that, and how soon do we need to get that going? Because I know you said it's on hold right now, at least in the paperwork here. And it
I'm
sounds to
sorry,
me
which
like
item
this-
was that again? 3?
339.
It's 1.1 million.
339.
Yeah.
Page 339, under Goal 3, Action A3, complete the wastewater treatment plant project engineering work and environmental review on hold. So at the last city council meeting, there was some conversation about the financing structures, and the council's direction at that time then was to do a rate study based on the financing alternatives that you identified, 20-year, 30-year stepped, fixed, for alternatives 3 and alternatives 4 under the different project dynamics. Alternative 3 going full MBR with recycled water straight out of the gate. Alternative 4 going MBR, and then in 10 years' time adding the recycled water component. So under right now, we've identified that as on hold because the council's direction at that time did not include any selection of a specific project alternative or any authorization to move forward with the project engineering. There's continued to be conversations with SYCSD, as one of the bits of direction was to get a proposal from them for operations of the plant. Certainly, I think that's an area where if we need to bring that back for further council conversation and direction, we could use a little bit more specificity on that. And I think that's what Councilmember Dearness is raising here, not only that it says on hold here in this document, but from our conversations on Friday, some of the challenges that that very broad direction presented to us since we started having conversations with the CSD, and all of us smart staff got in a room and realized there was a lot of questions we had that we just had no answers to. So bringing that back at us.
It seems like you can't answer the question about operations if you don't know which plant you're going to use, right? So I think we need to direct you guys to move forward on that. How do we do that?
Well, I wouldn't do that here now, but if you would like us to bring that back on September 9th for further clarification of that direction, we'd be happy to do so. At that point in time, I expect we'll have had at least one more meeting with the CSD staff. Yeah.
Right.
Are there any questions on the document, the structure, anything in there that you see where maybe we totally missed your goals or sentiments?
No, I'm,
So I was going back through the minutes, and I was rereading Daniel's motion. It says, quote, reduce and contain city hall operating expenses to the best financial model for small city governments, identify outsourcing opportunities, technology options, and analyzing staffing and internal systems to meet critical demands, efficiency, and effectively restructure accordingly, as mentioned at the June 22nd retreat, seconded by Karen Waite. Daniel, do you feel that this document addresses the very specific quote that you put into the motion?
I read through it. I've looked over it briefly. I have not had time to go through it in detail, but I was just going to say I like how it's put together. I would like more time. As he said, it's a living document, so I'd like to go through it and come back with any sort of other discussion items to look at specifically those things.
I think tonight's just for, receive, file, ask questions, but then we should put this back on for later when it's not,
9:30.
At 9:30 at night, and try to go through.
Yeah, and that was my understanding. This was the first presentation. We'll come back and we can, if we have something we want to add or change or whatever, obviously city staff's ready to go.
So are we ready to receive and file at this point, or are there more
I just
questions?
have 2 minute comments.
Please.
I just think the format is outstanding. And if you guys think 9:30 is late, you haven't been to a meeting in the last 3 months.
I think we want a little break.
Great.
I would just like some time to actually go through the document in detail.
Understood.
I think that's appropriate for something
So
like
will I.
this. Yeah.
So then, if I may, because I sense in the direction here, I will meet with each of you individually in the next week or so, as we normally do, and I would love to talk about the document more and hear any of your input and feedback, so that we can bring it back on September 9th and further discussion, because I do think that this is, from a staff's perspective, one of our most important items, just because this really starts to line out where any capacities we have for delivering on council goals.
And I'm sorry, I don't think we've gone out for public comment yet. Did we skip?
No, we
No.
haven't, but it,
We're still asking questions,
Yeah,
so now
yeah,
you
you're asking questions, and so I was asking, if that's good with you.
yeah.
Yes.
And Daniel,
I have a
really-
little head cold, so my tracking is not the best tonight.
Really quick, Daniel, look at page 347, because that was your motion at our meeting.
So, if you don't mind, I just wanted to clarify. So, in italics are the costs for items that aren't budgeted. So, as you review it further and give staff further direction, keep that in mind, because we'll need your approval for the funding to do anything that's not currently budgeted.
The one thing I think that might be missing from this presentation is a sense of priority. Maybe I'm not reading it correctly. For example, let's say you have 5 items under section 3. How do we know which ones are priority A, B, and C? I think we used that methodology a while back ago, and it seems to be missing in this one.
Well, I think to some extent the numerical position of them provided a bit of that. So goals 1 through 3 are what this council identified as your major goals. So certainly from a staff's perspective, the priorities in our minds are goals 1 through 3,
Okay.
because they really set up some of the financial dynamics moving forward from a fiscal policy perspective under goal 1, goal 2, identifying, what are our long-term capital needs, as well as starting to identify strategies in which we can increase future revenues in a variety of ways in order to meet those long-term fiscal requirements. And then goal 3 was really specific to the 2 areas where we recognized there were giant projects.
And I get that, but Matt just made a good point, which is there's a number of items within each category that are in italics because they haven't been approved?
They're
There's
not
no
funded.
funding. Okay, so that suggests that they aren't a priority, is that right?
In any items that the council wants to identify for us as priorities, we're happy to take that feedback.
All right. So it'll be done on a one-on-one basis, what you're saying?
And we can bring that back on September 9th for public discussion as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions of the staff report? Okay, with that, I'll go to public comment. The first speaker is Ed Skitt.
He's gone.
I believe he's gone.
Bueller?
Susan Bott.
Thank you. I'm Susan Bott, speaking for Save Our Solvang, and this is regarding Goal 4D2. Save Our Solvang thanks you for including us by name in Solvang's plans for the future. In speaking before City Council several times in the last 2 years, we've stated that we want to work with Solvang, City Council, and City staff to obtain a Solvang urban growth boundary. Our main goal is to give Solvang citizens the opportunity to vote on development plans for lands surrounding the city, and we welcome the chance to help. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
She's awesome.
I'm sorry, so just to confirm, so you're happy with with this, and you'll work with David on expand this item?
We've always said we wanted to work with the city.
Perfect. With that, we'll take this back to the council for discussion and action. I'll move that we receive and file and put this on the advance calendar for September the 9th.
I'll second that.
Maybe we address it earlier in the evening. It's been moved and seconded.
Mayor Toussaint?
Yes?
Councilmember Waite?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Dearness?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Passes 5-0. With that, we'll move on to Councilmember AB 1234 and committee reports. Who has reports?
I guess I do. Now, under the appointment of the city auditor, I think we also created an ad hoc committee on tourist destination. Is that the title we gave it?
Mayor Toussaint, Councilmember DeJarnis, we created an ad hoc committee on, some people use the term destination marketing, tourism marketing.
What should we call ourselves?
That's a great question. I have to go back and look at the exact title that's in the contract.
All right. The reason why I bring that up is because it's not here.
Okay.
And Robert and I have been meeting, and I want to bring that to the attention of the council so we don't run afoul of any problems. We met, for example, with,
I think the difference is that it's not is it not a formally,
It's an ad
it's
hoc.
not a standing committee, that's for sure.
It's not a standing,
it's not a formal committee, so I think you can just give your update during council comments.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
All right.
So these are all standing committees.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, then I guess I want to bring to the floor the idea that we met with the CSD.
So, okay, you're doing wastewater now.
Right.
Okay, thank
So
you.
you and I met, Mayor Toussaint and I met with CSD a couple of weeks back, and we pretty much forgotten everything that we talked about, but Dave Guessaway can probably bring to light some of those things. Just want to make sure that everybody knows we did meet with them. We were talking about the issues regarding Janet Acres and their problems with the septic tank, and trying to resolve that, perhaps by moving toward including them in the sewer system of Solvang. And then the question became, well, who's going to do that? Is it going to be Solvang or CSD that does that? These are questions that we need to resolve, and I think I'll leave it to Dave to explain further, but in the bottom line is we decided we needed to have some workshops or study sessions to help the people in Janet Acres understand what the issues are, and the people in Solvang, again, what our responsibilities are. And then the whole question about sphere of influence also arose from that discussion. Do you want to add anything to that?
We have the sphere of influence with regard to Janet Acres and whether we would turn that over to CSD to take care of them or not, or bring it here to Solvang. I think we also did talk about doing some workshops, some community engagement around some of those options. I'm trying to remember what else was on the agenda that day.
Little tiny thing, wastewater treatment plant.
Oh, that.
Oh, and then regionalization.
That's
Yep.
it, yeah. And talking about options for regionalizing those services.
Oh, that's right. That was a big one. That was a main
Studying anyways for joint operations, since they currently pay for 20% of the capacity in the wastewater treatment plant, the CSD that is. And so you are correct on the sphere of influence. What we're starting to do is have these conversations with the CSD about the city of Solvang potentially releasing our sphere of influence to the east side of our city because all of the sewer infrastructure, sewer collection infrastructure that's in that area is actually the CSD's trunk line that runs over to our wastewater treatment plant. So as there's septic system failures in that area, it really makes more practical sense for the CSD to potentially offer service to those residents as opposed to the city, because they have the facilities there and we don't.
Okay, I think that sums it up. Karen, did you have anything with SBCAG or APCD?
We haven't really had any SBCAG. There was a cancellation of the last meeting due to
No quorum or something?
Yeah, lack of attendance.
Okay.
And then I gave my report at the last meeting on the EMA. I believe Matt was absent from that meeting. That's when the Community Action Committee group was formed and selected. So no, that's it.
Okay. I have nothing. The only thing I can say is that we finally did schedule our first ad hoc water committee meeting with item number 1. So that'll be Chris and I from Solvang and Jeff Clay and I think is it Mike McCarty from item number 1? I think it's Mike. Okay. So we'll be doing that this week. Other than that, I don't think there's any other activity. I don't think we had any League of California City events or anything that we'd need to report on in AB 1234. So I think that concludes committee reports.
Okay.
With that, we'll move on to item number 12, council comments and requests. Who'd like to start?
I will.
Okay, Robert?
I have some things I'm working on, but I think, we've got our staff with their hands really full. And I want to not throw new things at them. I want to let them work on what they're working on and try and move things forward. So that's my impression on comments for the city. I would also like to thank Mr. Murphy, Mr. Lawson for sitting through an entire city council meeting. Very impressive.
I hope we entertained you.
I'm glad you think so. Got it. Well, thanks for being here. That's all I have.
It's one of the wine country rodeo.
Daniel or Chris or Karen?
Yes, Robert and I had what I consider to be a fairly successful ad hoc meeting with the chamber. Met he and I together, and then we met with Chip and Tracy and the chamber's attorney. So we'll be bringing that back to the council. We had a very great event last weekend, the car show, and I will let the mayor take over from there since he was a key.
Well, we had the Wheels and Windmills car show event here, and so I probably got a little sunburned as I spent 10 a.m. till around 2 p.m., then back at 3 to deliver the mayor's pick award. I don't remember the name of the person, but it was a 1965 red Corvette convertible that I picked. I was going back and forth between a couple Corvettes. It turned out they're both the same year, I believe. And I was trying to figure out which one's muffler I liked better or which one was just overall the cleanest.
So you're telling me you completely ignored the 500 horsepower Mini Cooper? Oh my God.
That was very tempting. there was a lot of very tempting cars. There was only 200 and something.
It was 4 feet long.
Yeah. It was a great event.
It was crowded at 10 a.m.
Yeah. Very crowded. I did go into some of the local merchants, and everyone seemed to be saying that they were getting business in the door from the event, which is great because I don't believe the event really cost us anything to put on. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. We delivered the mayor's award with Karen Waite. Thank you for your attendance.
You're welcome. I was there representing the city and the San Ynez Valley Elks.
There we go. And then also Robert Clark was there earlier with me. I don't know if anyone else was there, but that's at least.
He was getting old guy advice on certain things about cars. That was fun. I had a good time.
It was a lot of fun. Got to drive around the golf cart, and not sure about the city's liability insurance policy with regard to me doing that through a crowd, but we got through it, and I don't think there's any claims yet that have rolled in. So
They indemnified us.
perfect. All right. Let's see. Does anyone else have any?
I do.
Okay, Chris?
Unfortunately, I have a few things. We forgot to mention the fact that the ad hoc committee on legal, I don't know what they call this thing, but Daniel and I, consultations, we met and we went through a packet of attorneys and narrowed it down to a handful, and then we asked you to go ahead and look at it and bring that back.
That's on the advanced calendar for September 9th.
So I just want to let everybody know that we did that. Right?
Oh, wait, I have one more comment before September 9th. David will be doing a presentation in front of my Los Olivos Rotary Club regarding the city of Solvang. We invited him to speak at the Los Olivos Rotary Club.
Cool.
Great.
All right, I'll continue then.
I think you had some more comments.
I'm not sure what to call this ad hoc committee on tourism and destination tourism, maybe that's the right way to say it?
There is no actual
Name, all right.
destination marketing services.
I'm sorry. I'm going to need you to approach the.
I should be happy to get up again. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Chris DeJernis.
If you speak a little further back.
It's an ad hoc committee focused on destination marketing services.
I'll just
but
call
there's
it
no
the
title
DMS
for it.
committee.
That sounds good. Good job.
So the DMS committee,
Yeah.
composed of myself and Robert Clark, got together and talked with I can't remember the last guy, Andres Nuno and Steve Renfro, to discuss the idea of a fall beer festival. And they already presented, so I'm not going to go into any real detail. But I encouraged them to go ahead and put together something in terms of a concept and bring it to us, and they did that tonight. I think that we need to see more of that. I'd like to see more of that. And to that end, I was contacted by these gentlemen from San Ynez regarding the San Ynez Valley Wine Country Rodeo. I was asked to go out and listen to them and see if there was some way that we might work with them on their rodeo. So I encouraged them to come and make that presentation. I hope that both groups will come back and provide a more full presentation at the next meeting. We'll get you guys on the agenda, right? Well, if we get the nods, I suppose.
Can I make one comment on that too? Is that Andres has done the chili and wine, is it, in Buellton?
Among many other
Many others,
events,
correct.
right.
And the Chamber of Commerce in Buellton, I spoke to a day or so later, speaks very, very highly of what they do. So that was encouraging for
yeah.
somebody local to say that.
And that's a good point. Andres has a successful track record of taking small festivals that were producing maybe $5,000 in revenue and growing them to $50,000 revenue events. And Steve and Andres had been working together on these different events, like for example in Buellton, and that's why they teamed up in this particular instance. Nothing's going on in November. I thought it was a great idea, so I encouraged them to come. Now, for full disclosure, I have worked with Solvang Brewing Company in the past as a consultant in areas of finance, not marketing. I don't own any shares. I don't work for them now, but in the future, if and when we decide to vote on them, I will recuse myself just to be on the safe side. Having said that, I think we need to see more people come forward with great ideas that can help bring more tourism and higher spending visitors. For example, I think we may be looking at something similar for Yule Fest, now that we have to find a way to fulfill that event. Having said that, I want to move on to the idea of the RFP process. Again, going back to the DMS, we were tasked with coming up with an RFP process to, I guess, come up with a new entity, or at least allow people to compete to become a new entity to market and advertise Solvang.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember DeJernis, yes, that is our task, is to come up with the parameters for the RFP. I think I've gotten some input from other individuals. I know you have as well. We can consult certainly with the city manager, with Mr. Gassaway, about how that exactly is executed. to put out that RFP, but I think that's something, provided you and Councilmember Clark would be willing to get together and kind of accelerate that item.
I think we can
in
have
light
it
of
ready
what
for
just happened
next,
today.
for September 9th meeting? Okay.
Okay, so we have some work to do.
And then going back to the wastewater treatment plant issue, we did discuss the idea of workshops, or I don't know if that's the right term, study sessions, but a series of workshops and study sessions to help residents understand what we need to do going forward with that. Again, that's related to that wastewater treatment plant, or and the Janet Acres issue. So I'm assuming that you're doing that, planning those workshops?
Yeah, there's still more information that we need from a staff perspective in order to move forward. We're pretty preliminary and early in the process to start engaging the public, and we're looking into options. We're looking into the viability of tours at the plant and different educational outreach programs.
I was also thinking about the issue in Janet Acres.
Yeah, so the direction at that joint wastewater committee meeting was that our staff would work with CSD to come up with something like a flyer that we would get out to the residents over there to start educating them. But I think that delivery was still a few months out.
Yeah, yes.
I'm just bringing that up for discussion as well. And then finally, and I not to put too fine a point on this, but you've done a great job so far, and I would like to encourage you to, I don't even know how to bring this up. I think it's time that we discuss a performance review of what you've done, right? I mean, you actually came to us with a set of, I don't know what it was, a document basically saying, this is a suggestion for how to measure you against X, right? And we never did finalize that. And I think that would be helpful and productive if we did that. So you may want to schedule yourself, I don't know how you go about it. Maybe we do it as a performance review, or maybe we have another way of doing it, but I think that would be useful to bring that up again.
Okay.
I don't think that would be useful. And I'm not interested in doing a performance review on our city manager that we just hired.
This is a standard by which he wants to be measured.
Okay, so we have, I believe we have two events we had earlier during public comment. We had one by Andres and Steve Renfro that came up. I forget what the name of that, or do they have a name for that event? And then we also have this rodeo event, right?
Right.
So I think the appropriate direction for them on those items there is for them to work with our city manager and start putting together an event permit, right? An application?
Yes, we have a standard application process. They can come in and meet with us, with staff. We can walk them through what that process looks like, as well as if the Tourism and DMO Services Ad Hoc Committee is going to be out talking about events, we'd be happy to meet with you to show you guys what the process is as well, so that when you're talking with folks, you know the types of lead times. Hearing Mr. Nuno and
right.
Renfro discuss a November event 2 months out with major road closures is pretty tight from a timing perspective. Right. So I think we'd want to really establish what's realistically capable, but we definitely want to hear what they've got to offer for this year.
Perfect. So we'll make that a priority to work with them on figuring out those events for here for Solvang. And with that, I think we are adjourned.